Okay. All right. So to start the meeting, in August, we have our elections for officers and directors. So anyone that's here that's interested in serving as an officer or director in HITA, let somebody know. You can drop me a text. There's my phone number at 615-504-7345, if you can see that. And let us know if you're interested in serving and which office you'd be interested in, and we'll kind of get things rolling. And then, so that's the first thing we're going to talk about. Now, this class today is based upon uh, I have audited well over 300 home inspection agreements and reports, and I'll share two tidbits with you. Is that when people use canned reports, like the Spectora home gauge, whatever you're using, 90% of those that I've audited are not compliant to the standards of practice. And then when I went back and looked at all the reports that I audited where people wrote their own, 100% of them were not compliant to the standards of practice. So by doing this on Zoom, open up your inspection agreement, open up your report, and we're going to walk through this nice and slow. Because the first time I taught this class, uh, it was a 2 hour course, and the number of questions just took another hour just standing in the lobby of where we were hosting the meeting and answering questions for folks. So now we're looking at the home inspection licensing law, which was enacted in 2005. So it hasn't changed since it was brought in. The standards of practice, meanwhile, have changed several times. So when the executive director for the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance brought out what's become the standards of practice, that was the initial one, and then it was modified in 2014. It again went through a modification in 2024, and that's when, if you remember, we had the big hoopla about how to test smoke alarms. And originally, when that was written, we were required to remove every smoke alarm from a home and document its age. So we were able to, as the Home Inspectors of Tennessee Association, we went to the state and said, this is not a good thing. And so when I'm sitting in the meeting talking to the director, I said, Glenn, you've got 20-foot ceilings in your house. I'm going to bring in an extension ladder so I can remove your smoke alarm. And, and he didn't like that idea. Well, guess what? Nobody else will either. So we got the standards rewritten to a much more palatable method. And then we worked with the state fire marshal to get the free smoke alarm program launched out. So now your requirements for reporting smoke alarms requires you to tell people that they can get free smoke alarms from the state of Tennessee. And that's been tremendous. Well, in 2026, the standards were changed again. So now you've got more words that you must add to your report in order to be compliant to the standards of practice. So we're going to start going through this today. And this all focuses on the power of the word shall. And shall is a mandatory uh, edit. Okay, did the screen change? Good. Okay. All right. So we're going to working on contracts, reports, business, and ethics. And so those are all the things that we're going to be talking about today in a nice, slow manner. So if you have a question, put it in the chat on the Zoom or send me a text, and we'll answer each of those questions as they come in. Okay. So when we look at the Tennessee Code Annotated, that's the Tennessee Home Inspector Licensing Act of 2005. The word shall appears in law 27 times. So when we look at this, we're going to be talking about the law and the standards of practice because it is the minimum that you're required to do. So when we one of the common phrases in home inspection is people ask us, is my home built to code? Well, the standard reply is code is that's the worst house a contractor is required to build. They can't go below the standards, which we call building codes. And that encompasses the IRC, uh, the NEC, the plumbing code, the fire code. All those things get thrown into what a builder's minimum requirement is. Well, in home inspection, that's what this law and the standards of practice are. This is the worst job you're allowed to do. You can exceed the standards of practice, and that's a discussion for later. Is should you exceed the standards of practice when you're conducting a home inspection for your clients? So, shall is an imperative command. It indicates that certain actions are mandatory and not permissive. So, you got to do this no matter what happens else in the world. Okay. So, when you look at places like Merriam-Webster, this is what it's used to express a command or exhortation, and you shall do something. In law, it's a regulation or directive to express what is mandatory, and that's the way it's written here. So when I looked at some of the most ridiculous laws in the country, I found out that in Florida, it is unlawful to tie an alligator to a fire hydrant. This law came about because some guy set his house on fire and he didn't want the fire department to show up and put it out, so he tied an alligator to the fire hydrant. Um, they quickly made that a law. Can't do that. Indiana had one of the most unusual laws I've ever seen is it's unlawful to carry an ice cream cone in your back pocket. I would really like to know what happened that they felt like this was a mandatory law. Um, so when we look at the TCA 62-6-302 Part 3A, it describes that a home inspection is a visual analysis and covers all 9 systems of the home that are identified in law. And then, so as we walk through these, the most interesting one is the catch-all of Part 9. And, and so we go through, we look at the heating systems, we look at the cooling systems, electrical plumbing, structural foundation, roof coverings, exterior, interior components. And then the catch-all is any other site aspect that affects the residential dwelling. And a lot of times that'll cover things like sidewalks, driveways, retaining walls, um, vegetation around the home, different things along those lines. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about today was the reasons you want to follow the standards of practice. Uh, as long as no one ever complains to the state of Tennessee about you, you have no reason to follow the standards of practice because it'll never come up. The second reason is if someone files a lawsuit against you, then suddenly following the standards of practice becomes extremely important. Now, in a case that was just brought up in West Tennessee, the home inspector had written in his contract that he was not responsible for gross negligence and he was not responsible for willful neglect. And the judge upheld that. That is the most egregious reading from a judge that I have ever encountered. That is not good for the public good. And now the case will go to court Monday as an appeal against that judge's ruling. So I won't find out probably until late next week how this appeal happened, but it clearly needs to be appealed. It is definitely not in the public interest to include in your inspection agreement that you're not responsible for negligence or neglect.
Tim,
That's just
if I can interrupt for just a second on that, on the legal side of things, with that under in the state of Tennessee, anything written into a contract is legally binding in the state of Tennessee if the person signs off on it. That's why the judge ruled the way he did. Just to make you aware that there is a law that stipulates that anything written in a contract is legally binding.
yes, and it's also written in law that it when something in the contract is against the public interest, it can be ruled out as part that particular section of a contract can be ruled out. So this is something that the lawyers are going to fight over for quite a long time, I'm sure.
Maybe
Um,
if you would have worded it slight neglect instead of egregious neglect, that would have been a pass.
yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think the best thing out of this is the home inspector that did this is no longer in business. That's the best news. Um, so when we move on to part 3B, um, we're not required to make this compliant to building codes or any other codes adopted by a state or a political division of the state. A home inspection does not mean any work that is within the scope of practice of architecture, engineering, landscape, and or is performed by a person qualified to use the title a registered interior designer. And I thought that was interesting. I did not know that interior designers are a licensed profession in Tennessee. Uh, so I thought that was quite interesting because I have done a couple of inspections for registered interior designers. And so I got nicely educated over that. Um, a home inspection also does not mean inspection or assessment by a lender, either as part of an evaluation of value or for purposes of determining whether or not to extend credit, provided that the inspection or the assessment shall not be represented as a home inspection report. So this kind of frees you up as an income source is that you can do an assessment on a home as long as you don't use a home inspection report format or call it a home inspection report. And that is something that is a revenue source that can be explored. Um, Now, as we go through this, I will tell you that I do provide um, audits of your agreement and report on a very personalized note. If you send me an agreement and report asking for that, I do charge $350 to do that service. And if you want to engage in that, drop me a line. We'll talk about it and we'll kind of go from there. Um, but this class should help you get your report and your agreement fully in line with the standards of practice and uh, all those kinds of things. So we should be good to go um, to proceed on uh, defining what a home inspection report is and what an assessment of a property can be. And you're going to find this very valuable, especially if you get into litigation. um, One that I just did this past week, they asked me to go do a home inspection on a thing. And when I got done, I'm sitting there talking to the attorney, and we decided it is not in the best interest to produce a home inspection report. In this case, all of everything that I say and do is just a consultation as an expert witness. And so, as long as no report is produced, it all is retained under attorney client privileges. So, producing a report in this case was probably going to be detrimental to the case. So then it just becomes an assessment. And along those lines. Does that make sense how I explained that to everybody? The difference between an inspection report and assessment for something like a litigation or something that you might do for a realtor. Um, I've had I have about six realtors that will call me on a regular basis and ask me to come and look at something and make an assessment on it without issuing it a report. I still get paid. I just don't have to issue a report.
Yeah, they were calling those walkthrough inspections here in the Nashville area. There's a lot happened a lot during COVID.
Yes. And a lot of people talk about that being walkthrough inspections. Yep. So that kind of removes some liability because there's no evidence. So moving on, here's your
Tim, hold on a
report.
second. On those, because I've never done one of those. Quick question: is there still a contract involved, or is there no contract either?
No, there's no contract. You don't publish photos. You don't write a report. Basically, you walk through and then have a talk about
So I actually use a contract,
for a
but
walkthrough.
yep, but the contract says that there's no report or photos
Yes,
generated. It
a
gives us,
modified agreement.
And the
yep,
contract actually states this is not a home inspection.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Because there is some kind of liability involved. So you got to have.
Okay. So because you produced a document, now that's what exposes your liability
Uh,
is because there's a
Uh,
document involved.
You did
I
not create a document that specifies your findings in the house. Uh,
absolutely not.
yeah, all you're doing is creating a document that says you have this agreement with your client. And it's not to do a home inspection, it's to do a consulting walkthrough.
Okay.
We call it a
Correct.
consulting service.
Yep.
Is the contract signed by your client?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's going to be a point for a couple of legal teams to sort out.
Yep.
So,
That's
Well,
why I have good lawyers.
if you're charging a fee, you better have a contract that says that you can charge that fee and they agree to it and what you're doing for that fee. So you can't get away from not having a contract, I don't believe, and still operate in a good, solid business mode.
Actually, if you exchange money, you have entered into a contract.
excellent. I love the conversation. Does anybody else have something they want to weigh in about that?
The only thing is, is having a contract then causing a liability, or is it not? You would think that it's getting rid of a contract because you're saying you're just doing a visual, you're not doing a home inspection. So I'm a little confused on that. That's why I asked.
Yeah, it's interesting, how I see different people handle what they call the walk and talk inspections, where the client has to take all their own notes, take their own pictures. Um,
So
So when you're doing an assessment,
you're always going to have liability. Any you walk down the street and you have liability. So it's a matter of mitigating as much liability as possible. So if you have a contract that says this is not a home inspection, not anywhere close, it's a visual consulting service, and that's all it is, and you're paying me X amount an hour to be there. No report will be generated, no pictures will be, or exchanged, blah, blah, blah. Um, that requires them to pay you. You've kind of set the groundworks as to what it is.
okay, very good.
I
so when
would,
you do one of these walkthroughs, do you keep any personal note? Like, do you keep your own personal notes
Absolutely
or
not.
picture?
If you keep it, it is not they can ask for it.
Okay.
Right. I let them know it's a
So
verbal
so
assessment only.
So one thing that was said earlier is not necessarily true. If you write a report and the only time that it is sent is includes your lawyer, and there's some other words, for review of, then it is not, then it is a non-disclosable document because it is considered attorney-client privileges. I went through all kinds of audits when I worked in higher education with the federal government for Title IX, and we had all kinds of written communications, but we always had to include the attorney, the university's attorney, and then it was a non-discoverable document because it was considered a client attorney privilege.
Uh,
So,
I
so
also
there's
recommend that you don't use the term inspection anywhere in this consulting agreement, because then
absolutely
it less confusing of whether it's an inspection or not.
service. It's a service. It's not an inspection.
I would think you'd have to be somewhat careful, even though you try to explain it to the customer and they interpret it wrong and write it down wrong. That liability there, you have to be exempt from that, I would think, correct?
So then it becomes a he said, she said, which is, if you write it down and keep it, then it's a discoverable document. Um, and but if it's just when I was talking, this is the way I presented it, and you have, I don't remember what I said. It was 2 months ago. Anyway,
Yeah. So that begs the question then, should you record the conversation?
then it becomes discoverable.
Yes. Yep. Any document produced becomes discoverable.
If they write you a check for payment,
Hmm.
then there is documentation that you were there. So in my opinion, in my attorney's opinion, who advised me, um, said I should have an agreement for a walkthrough.
Okay.
Now, if they're paying me cash, but that's gets into other,
Okay.
should you report cash or not?
Uh,
Yeah, that's
Larry, Tim, Lee had also asked a question online there about what section and item number that requires the mention of the free smoke detector program.
we're getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Great.
Okay. Good discussion. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate. That's why this is so important to weigh in on these aspects. So when you look at the law, a home inspection report means a legibly written document prepared for compensation and issued after a home inspection. The report shall include, and here's all the following things that shall be included by law. Okay. So a report on any system or component inspected that, in the opinion of the inspector, is significantly deficient. And a report under this subdivision must include the reason why the system or component is significantly deficient. Okay. So you report your defects, and then you got to tell them why it is deficient. Okay. And then the law says you shall list deficiencies, and the law says you shall state the reason it is deficient. And one of the things that I typically see in a lot of different reports is, should your report also state where the deficiency exists? So, as an example, if you highlight an outlet that is ungrounded and it's an anomaly for the house, um, should you just tell them that, hey, this outlet is ungrounded, or should you also tell them where it's at, considering the number of outlets inside of a home? Uh, should you tell them where the deficiency exists? Is it in the bedroom? Is it in a living room? that's a question that you might want to consider to be part of your report. Another question that I tend to ask myself when I'm going through some of these reports is, should your report also state what your clients should do and why they should do it? Okay, so you've listed the deficiency and you've listed the reason it is deficient. Should you tell your clients what they should do? Now, by law, you have no obligation to do that. But it seems like in order to be helpful to your client, you should tell them what they should do and why they should do it. So, in something like an ungrounded outlet, well, if you've ever been to, say, a concert and you suddenly see the lead singer jerk his head way back like this, well, he probably touched his lips onto an ungrounded microphone and got the snot knocked out of him. So, uh, in cases like musical instruments, that's relatively important. Another thought that always comes to mind, if you recommend further evaluation, should you state who should do the evaluation? Like an ungrounded outlet, you know, if you don't, in my opinion, if you don't tell them who should do the evaluation, they could call their brother-in-law and he'll come in and say it's just fine. Where an electrician would say, you should fix this, and this is what we can do to fix it. So there's always questions that come up as we're looking through different home inspection reports about how things should be done. In TCA 62-6-302, Part 4, A through F, your report, and this is again on your report and not your agreement, a list of any systems or components that were designated for inspection in the standards of practice adopted by the commissioner, but that were not inspected. And then Part C, the reason a system or component listed for inspection, why it was not inspected. So, important aspects there. The standards of practice designate a whole lot of things that are supposed to be inspected. And this is when we get into the standards of practice and the shalls that we encounter in that, we're going to talk about this particular aspect again, because the law is written rather generically and the standards of practice are written very generically. And that's intentional because there are so many different styles of construction and fixtures and components inside of a home. And that's the reason all this is very generically written. And also, it gives lawmakers and judges an opportunity to make different decisions as we go. Okay. So in Part 4, A through F, this must be included in your report, these words. So as you're looking at, these words also have to be included in your agreement and they have to be included in your report. And so a statement that the report does not address environmental hazards, including. Now, when you look at this list, be sure these words are in there. You could expand on it. You can add more words if you'd like to. But in my opinion, when you don't include these words, now you're open the door to a client's complaint to the state, and you've opened the door in litigation to highlight that your report and your agreement are not compliant to the standards of practice. So adding all these words is very important. Now, if you'd like a direct copy of the standards of practice and the law, you can get that off of the tn.gov website. You can also get it off of the HITA website. Now, the HITA website, we're in the process of getting that updated because we kind of fell behind. So the standards you want to read are the January 2026 standards. That will give you all the words that you're required to have and things that you're obligated to do and perform as a home inspector in order to properly serve your clients. So when you look at, lead-based paint, radon, radon is an interesting one because so many of us offer radon services. I've seen some agreements where people put if radon is something you offer, you might want to put a clause in your agreement that says if a radon test is ordered, no additional contract is required. And that's perfectly fine. But your agreement has to list the things that you are going to inspect and what their price is going to be. And that's something that will be covered here very shortly. So asbestos, cockroaches, rodents, pesticides, treated lumber, fungus, mercury, carbon monoxide, and here's the catch-all, other similar environmental hazards. So in a lot of the agreements, I see that people don't put uh, cockroaches in there. They'll say creepy crawly pests. So then you've got two lawyers arguing whether or not cockroaches are included as part of a creepy crawly pest. So it makes it when lawyers get in a room and start arguing, it's always an interesting listen. And then the next part of the report that I see in agreements and in reports are these next statements. A statement that the report does not address wood destroying insects and organisms. All of them seem to have that. And a statement that the report does not address subterranean systems or system components, operational or non-operational, including your sewage disposal, water supply, fuel storage, and delivery. Now, I see so many of these that a home inspector will list if the sewage is a septic or public sewer. You're not obligated to list that. If you get it wrong, you got a problem. You're going to have a problem in litigation. You're going to have a problem if someone complains to the state about you. Because if you list it as a septic system and it's actually on a sewer, well, the first time they get a bill for a sewer bill, you might get a phone call. And hopefully it doesn't go past a phone call. But here's where you've exposed yourself pretty well to an opportunity for someone to complain about you. Same way with the water supply. If it's on a well, or whether it's on city water, if it's on a well and you know that city water is available in that area, you need to look very closely for cross connections. I know in my own house, I've got a well that has been capped off, but every year the water company comes out, the public water supply comes out to my house and says, we're here to make sure that you're not contaminating our city water with your well. I told the guy the last time, I said, well, here's a shovel. Would you like to dig down and find where I capped it off? And he politely declined. He didn't want to dig down 3 feet to see that well cap. Same way with fuel storage and delivery. Whether it's natural gas, propane, kerosene, heating oil, whatever choices that they use along those lines. These things are outside of the obligations that you have to follow.
Tim,
Yes.
on my water supply where it says entrance, I always check unknown because you can have copper coming through that foundation wall, but you don't know for sure that it's not galvanized, especially on older homes. If it's not galvanized running to the house and then connected to copper. So I always put unknown on my report as far as what's coming to the house.
Yeah, and that's probably a pretty good practice, Larry. That's quite common here in my area on the older homes where they'll run from the the water meter up to the house with galvanized.
Right.
And that is usually exposed pretty quickly because of the age of it and how they tend to rust shut on the inside with no evidence that there's deterioration on the outside. And
Right.
your water flow test will a lot of times point that out. Um, so when you're running all the water fixtures and you start looking for uh, a drop off in the water flow, especially on second story homes,
Right.
that's always a good one. Now, in a house with a well, seeing a drop off of flow at a second story is not uncommon, but it's still used. That might be something you want to consider documenting in your report because that is part of the standards of practice. Yeah, especially with, has anyone seen that lawsuit against D.R. Horton on the Uponor PEX? Okay. Uponor is a company that produced a PEX product. And what they did, they used the cross-linked polyethylene, but then they put a color coating on the outside of the pipe. That color coating caused undulations in the inside of that PEX pipe, and it's causing those Uponor PEX fittings and the pipe itself to fail. It also greatly weakened the burst capacity of that Uponor pipe. So the Uponor pipe, its burst capacity fell under 500 psi, where when the manufacturers incorporate color into the PEX piping in the manufacturing process, they're finding burst pressures of their pipe well over 1,000 psi. So that's what's making PEX so popular is if your uh, plumbing should freeze, uh, it has an expansion capability that typically does not cause a burst. So that's always a good thing. Now, in some of the plastic fittings, they may fail, but the pipe itself typically won't. Some of the brass connectors that are also popular in that type have potential to fail because it's a rigid product. So, and your inspections, look out for the Uponor labeled PEX products because that's probably going to become a class action as it goes through. But right now, from what I'm seeing, the only one listed has been D.R. Horton.
Tim, can you visually see the difference in them if it's paint? I know it's painted or whatever. Like because the ones come through that I've always seen are just the red or blue or the white that are just made that way with the plastic.
Yeah, usually Uponor is very proud of their product, so they put their name all over it. So anytime I go in and see PEX Plumbing, I start looking for who made it. Um, in my area, Shark Bite's a very popular product to make the PEX. There's another one that starts with a T, Trune or Truand, makes a pretty good product. But Uponor does label their product, uh, all along the length of the pipe. So if you can, look for that. And sometimes that PEX product is so completely hidden, you've got no idea who made it. And so after that lawsuit was issued, I put a statement in my reports that said, I do not know who manufactured this PEX product. It is not labeled. And I do that just simply for liability in the event it is a Uponor product. Any other questions about that? That was kind of a tangent I just walked off on. So, uh, okay. Now, in the law, the commissioner has the power and the duty to promulgate rules and regulations. And those rules and regulations are what we call the standards of practice. And then it says the rules shall be promulgated in accordance with the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act compiled in Title IV, Rule 5. If you want to look that up, have right at it. But those are the rules that the executive director has to follow when they make changes to the standards of practice. Um, so it's they can't just willy-nilly start changing things. They have a specific um, law that they're required to follow as they go through. Okay. Now here's an interesting one. When the standards of practice were being formulated, and I know several guys that were on those committees. The commissioner may appoint a committee of licensed home inspectors with at least 5 years experience. They don't have to, but they can. They certainly can. HITA always stays very close to the state whenever some of these things begin to happen. And so you can go onto the tn.gov website and you can click the little box that says, please notify me of these changes as they're being worked through. That's something that I do in my position on the board of directors with HITA. I get those notifications and I inform the board every time something gets brought up, whether it is with home inspectors, contractors, or realtors, because all three of those disciplines greatly impact what we do as home inspectors. We want to stay abreast of the realtors because they are one of the most powerful forces in the Tennessee legislature. So having them on our side rather than an adversary was very beneficial when it came to the smoke alarms. The Tennessee Association of Realtors made a phone call into Governor Lee's office and really helped us kick the ball off to get the smoke alarm changes enacted. So in the committees, when people are selected to serve on this committee, they choose ASHI, which is the American Society of Home Inspectors, the Home Inspectors of Tennessee, which is HITA, and the National Association of Certified Home Inspectors, which eventually became INTERNACHI. These other two are defunct. The National Association of Home Inspectors, or NAHI, was absorbed by ASHI. The American Home Inspection Association, they just kind of quietly closed their doors. So there's only three associations that the state recognizes as being legitimate, and that's ASHI, INTERNACHI, and HITA. So membership in HITA is extremely important because we do require some funding to stay in touch with the state and all the notifications that go out, and especially if some changes are proposed to the standards which increase our liability or puts our clients or the homes we're inspecting at risk. So this is very important. And so spread the word about HITA to the other home inspectors that you meet and the reasons why we should be involved in this. When it came to the smoke alarms, if HITA had not rung that bell to all the home inspectors in the state, that probably would have been enacted. So the HITA organization is very important to maintain. When we start looking at licensing, the commissioner determines that an applicant meets all of these following requirements, and the commissioner shall issue a license to the applicant that shall expire 2 years following the date of issuance. Here's an impact on this that was not part of the law and was not part of the standards of practice, was when the state of Tennessee came out and just unanimously, with no dissent and no discussion, is what they called the second chance law. So the second chance law came about because some convicted felons wanted to become home inspectors. And evidently, some of those people that were convicted felons who wanted to be home inspectors were relatives of lawmakers. So the lawmakers put together a whole list of people that can have convicted felonies and still be licensed. And there was only one exception. If you're a convicted felon, you may not become a locksmith. Other than that, you can become a home inspector, a realtor, anything, any licensed profession in the state of Tennessee except locksmith. HIDA complained about that. We sent our concerns. The state said, trust us, we know what we're doing. Thank you very much.
It's a government.
I guess that includes politicians too, huh?
Yeah, they can even become politicians, even though you don't have to be licensed for that. Yeah. Uh, so your license expires after 2 years from the date of issuance, unless it's been revoked, suspended, or surrendered. The expiration date of the license shall appear on the license, and no other notice of its expiration need to be given to its holder. The commissioner shall maintain a roster which shall be made available to the public. Okay, so in the Freedom of Information Act and public records information, according to the state of Tennessee, anyone can file to find out who all of the home inspectors are in the state of Tennessee. So, as of about 2 weeks ago, there has been over 3,000 licenses issued since 2005. Currently, there's about 920 active. So 2,000, about 2,200 people who have been licensed are no longer licensed. That's a pretty good failure rate. Um, Not as much as realtors, but still a pretty good failure rate. Um, and so in that roster, you can request all the information you want: the names, license number, address, email address, phone number, all whatever you want to get, the state will supply to you. And you do that on the tn.gov website. Uh, and so all licensees shall notify the commissioner immediately of any change of name under which the license conducts business, or business address. Um, I regularly request this change, or the names and addresses of licensed home inspectors. As much as, in the worst case I can remember, about 15% of the email addresses that the state knows about are no longer working. And that's only active home inspectors. So when you try to send an email to an active home inspector and it comes back as defunct, well, the state does not know that that email address is no longer working. So you are obligated to tell them. If you move, you got to tell them. If you change your email, you got to tell them. If you change your business, any of those things, you should register that change with the state of Tennessee, because it says you shall do this. Questions and concerns about that? Okay. Now we've reached our 50-minute time limit, and so a 10-minute break is acceptable according to the standards of practice. And so I leave it up to all the people on this. Do you want to continue for another 50 minutes and then take a short break?
No, let's take a quick break.
Okay, let's take a quick 10-minute break. Let's come back at 9:03 Central and 8:03 or 10:03 Eastern. Okay.
Hey, Joe, can you hear me? Joe,
Yeah, I can hear you.
quick question for you. Since Tim isn't here and he's the rules guy and Adam isn't either. I talked to Blaine about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, about setting up the class for the East Tennessee portion for August and the location. And I asked him about doing it at the Hard Rock Cafe in Bristol, which he was cool with. But then I got thinking about it, and the only thing is it's literally 100 yards beyond the Tennessee border, the cafe and casino, so and hotel. So are we? Can we do that? Even though it's right across the border there, or would that be a no bueno because it's not in the state itself, or would that be okay because it's kind of like Internachi or whatever, where they, you can go online from anywhere and get it?
I think it doesn't matter where you're at.
Okay, all right. Because I wanted to ask and get an opinion on that, just because I know Tim knows more of the rules than all of us, so but I figured I'd ask.
We don't always agree with Tim's
Oh
interpretation
no,
of
of course
the
not.
rules.
But I was thinking about it. And I'm like, well, that'd be pretty cool because it's a brand new hotel and casino, and kind of fun. And it's literally 100 yards across the border, the
Yeah.
way Bristol is.
So where's everybody from that's in the class today? Just curious.
Well, originally I'm from New York, but I live in Kingsport.
And I'm in Knoxville.
So yeah, currently obviously operating. All right, I'm in Nashville. I'm a newbie here, guys. So
I'm in
Welcome
Franklin,
aboard.
Kentucky.
You'll enjoy it, Jim. The what got me hooked was doing the in person classes. Joe actually got me hooked, Boersma. And we feed you in the morning, we feed you for lunch, but now with the video side of things too, where we're splitting it up some, it makes it even more convenient to stay part of the group. And the knowledge, I'll tell you, just from my personal experience, I'm the regional director for East Tennessee. Um, my experience has been that if I've run into an issue, this has been a super resource. I can call Joe. I can call what's Lily's first name there, Joe?
Mark, no,
I forgot his first name. Well, anyways, he's a retired Knoxville code enforcement officer. I had some questions, and I've seen a lot of benefits. I've seen a lot of weird stuff over here in East Tennessee, like straw houses. And I brought that up to the fire marshal, and I couldn't get a straight answer from them, and they're still working on it. How do we go about inspecting that? Because straw, like with barns, spontaneously combusts when wet, between 18 and 20% moisture. So what do you do when there's a pipe in the
interesting.
wall? How do they prevent the fires? Is that a fire risk? So that's, there's a lot of benefits to it that I've seen for me, and I've been here for several years, and I've really enjoyed it. And I got to tell you, I've learned a lot.
Good to know.
And speak of the devil, there's Tim right there, the man, the
Hey,
myth.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hey,
I had to
well,
have a potty
I have
break.
a question, little sidebar question before we get started. Uh, if we have, this work has worked well for the Memphis area. If we've got or a agent or a client that's outside of our normal operating footprint, so I'm in the Nashville area. I've got some people that are starting to look down Alabama borderline and everything. It's just too far for me. What's the best way for me to reach them? I can do a search on the hit a site. Is that pretty much it? And just reach out and say, hey, I'm doing a warm handoff here. Somebody's like 2.5, 3 hours away from me. The reason I'm asking is I had this was actually in the Nashville area, and I had somebody that I've worked with for about 10 years, and I couldn't get to him on a particular day. It was a hot inspection, and I gave him three. Now I didn't get a chance to do a warm handoff. I just said, "Hey, here's three guys in the Nashville area off the HITA site," and he said he had called all three of them and nobody called him back. So I just thought that, I'll take that on me that maybe there should have been a better way for me to do that handoff. Is there a process within HITA for that, or is it just do the search on the site and email, text, call, whatever? Is that pretty much the best thing? Sorry, I know it's off subject.
No,
We
that's
don't we don't really have a procedure for doing that. So but I'd recommend you actually try to call the inspector you're trying to hand off to and give them a heads up.
The question would be, is the HITA list up to date? Tim, do you know offhand, or Joe?
The HITA list that you get to on the HITA website is as up to date as our members have input it. You put it in. So if they haven't updated some of their information, then we don't know that it's wrong.
Do we have a website administrator or, dedicated for that, even part-time, or is that kind of just one of us guys?
Stephen Dukic is our is administrating that. I do some of it also as a treasurer. Um, Adam Kinnaman does some with the membership side of it, but it's whatever we put in the system. If we get a new member and we tell you they're a member, now they become available in that search criteria, search list. So like uh, Terry Moore here is on the call today, just joined yesterday. And so he's now available on that search.
Okay, all right. Thanks, guys. I'm sorry. Thanks for the digression there. I don't want to get us off subject here too far.
Yeah.
no, that's great, Jim. That's what HITA wants to be is a source when you have someone that's in a remote area or you get too busy and you need some help. I've got several guys here in Middle Tennessee. When I can't do something, I have no problem recommending them.
I don't do inspections anymore, but Melissa does, and she has essentially vetted 3 or 4 other inspectors that she feels comfortable referring her clients to if she can't make their schedule. So
That's what I'm after.
yeah.
Okay, so to switch gears real quick for Tim and Adam, because I already asked Joe this, you guys weren't sitting at your computers. I talked to Blaine about 2 weeks ago, as I explained to Joe, and I asked him about doing the next class for August because we're gonna be doing it over in the Tri Cities area, about doing it at the Hard Rock Cafe in Bristol. The only thing is, it's about 100 yards past the border in Bristol, Virginia. So it's about 100 yards from the Tennessee border. So I wanted to ask, I asked Joe. Joe gave his opinion. I think it's okay, but I don't know. I figured, Tim and Adam, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's no restrictions about where meetings happen. Meetings are something that's HITA, where when you look at ASHI or InterNACHI, everything they do is online. Until they get to uh, each one of those organizations have what's annually, they have some type of a large expo like HITA does. And generally it's held in Florida or New Orleans or someplace else, and that's perfectly fine. There's no problem with that at all. As long as the state's the courses taught are accredited by the state, it don't matter where you have them.
Mark, I talked to Master Services. I talked to BJ, and they have a office up there in Bristol that he said we could use also.
Okay, yeah, I've been putting out feelers. I stopped at the Hard Rock, but I didn't want to push yet because I wanted to talk to everybody on the board to see where that was at. And yeah, I agree with Tim on
Would
that.
you have enough area in the Hard Rock that it would be quiet enough for us to have a class?
They have conference rooms. It is a casino, hotel and resort, so I mean it does have conference rooms. I haven't been in those conference rooms, but I couldn't tell you how quiet it is, so I don't know.
Yeah. Hard rock mandatory, I'm sure.
I've been to several conferences at casinos. The conference rooms tend to be quiet because they're trying to draw business people in to, to generate business. So if they were noisy, business people wouldn't go there, i.e., they wouldn't want to. So never hurts to check, though. Should form an exploratory committee and, you know,
Well, I'm going to go over there probably later this week to check it out. So that's why I just wanted to put it to the board to see what everybody was thinking. So sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to interrupt your class. I'll let you get back to doing what you're doing.
Oh, no, that's fine. Hey, this is just all part of the fun. So, moving on to the next slide, the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, the Division of Regulatory Boards, they created a rule called 0780-05-12. And so inside of that are several more subsets in this rule, and it covers home inspectors, how to get licensed, disciplinary actions, code of ethics, all kinds of different stuff related to being a home inspector. And it's basically known as the standards of practice. In this document, the word shall appears 81 times. There are 81 mandatory requirements in the standards of practice that are a part of your inspection agreement and your report. So as we start muddling through some of these, any person who seeks to be licensed as a home inspector shall complete an application form, which we're all licensed, so we all had to do this, and submit the completed application to the commissioner, which at that point they do a brief background check to make sure that if you are a convicted felon, what were you convicted of, and whether or not they choose to issue you a license. They may choose to not issue a license if you have had numerous complaints against you. If you have moved in from another state where you had numerous complaints against you, um, all those things factor in. So there is one case pending right now where a home inspector is moved into Tennessee from another state, and the state has been notified that this individual uh, may not be the most honest person in the market. So the state's been apprised, and I'm sure they're doing their due diligence before they issue this individual a license. So in the application requirements, any person who desires to obtain a license shall submit the application along with the required fee, which is what, $200, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the application requirements, this is in, here's where you see the first subset of 0780-05-12-.04, part 2, items A through H. So the standards of practice is a pretty long document. An applicant for licensure shall furnish evidence satisfactory to the commissioner that the applicant, you got to be at least 18. We all qualified there because we're licensed, graduated from high school or earned a high school equivalent credit. Now, you see how the words high school equivalent credit are all in capitals? That is one of the changes that happened in the January 2026 change, because it used to say a GED. Now it says a high school equivalent. This was brought out. This had to be changed because of the voucher program that Governor Lee had brought into the state of Tennessee. So now they call it a high school equivalent instead of a GED. So in Part C, this is another change to the standards of practice. So in Part C, it says, has not been convicted of a felony offense that bears directly on the person's fitness to practice competently as determined by the commissioner and comports with the provisions of this special law, TCA 62-76-104, which I believe you will find is the second chance law. That's how it's been termed. So hopefully they're taking a close look at this before they issue a home inspector license to a convicted felon. The argument that HITA made to the state was, how many times do you go into a house and there's cash laying around, there's expensive jewelry, there's guns, uh, that, which if they steal cash or jewelry, that's one thing. When they steal guns, that's a whole new game. So hopefully they're paying close attention to all this and acting accordingly. Moving on to Part D, make sure that the person being requesting a license is not subject to disciplinary enforcement action by another state or local jurisdiction in connection with the performance of home inspections or the licensing or certification of home inspectors. So this is kind of expands on what the commissioner is obligated to do before they issue a license. Make sure the applicant successfully completed 90 hours of education approved by the commissioner in the performance of home inspections and the preparation of home inspection reports. Well, that's part of the proof you have to submit. Since we're all licensed, we got through that one somehow. Also, you have to pass the National Home Inspector exam developed by the Examination Board of Professional Home Inspectors. Okay, this is a special board that's nationwide. So if you want to look up the EBPHI, you can see who all of the directors are that create the questions in the national exam. So these folks meet on a regular basis. There's some questions that have been brought forth in the exam that need to get fixed because they're completely wrong. The answer you're required to put in is wrong. So,
Tim, I got a quick question. It came up at the expo there. I mean, several of us were kind of going back and forth on that one. Was that those of us who took the test, the exam a while ago, probably would fail it now because of all the changes. So, why is this board making all those kinds of changes, specifically to make it almost impossible to pass? I mean, it sounds like people are taking 2 or 3 attempts to pass it. I mean, do we have any background on that at all?
they are completely independent of HITA, and sometimes things slip through the crack. That part we know. And sometimes you get questions that just completely are irrelevant to the state of Tennessee. And so I know a couple of the board members, and we had discussions about this and what can the EBPHI do to make the test more relevant to the location where it's being done. They quickly brought up one of the problems with that is if you take a state like Alabama that has a coast and a northern part that has completely different requirements. So when you look at the coastline, they've got wind mitigation requirements in construction that aren't relevant to the northern part of the state. So it makes it somewhat difficult on them to completely tailor their test. He said they do try to generalize things, but there's still going to be some questions that get asked that you're never going to run into in Tennessee as a home inspector. I wish they could do a better job. If I get approved, I'll be on the board here in August. So when the board meets, I put my application in to sit on that board. Hopefully it'll happen, but you never know. Good question though, and it is certainly something that's being talked about and considered. Another requirement that you have is a current certification of general liability insurance in the amount of at least $500,000 and has a current certificate of errors and omissions insurance to cover all your home inspection activities contemplated under the law 62-6-301 and all the rules in the standards of practice. So, because you got a license, you have submitted to the state your record showing your errors and omissions and the amount that's covered and your general liability and the amount that's covered. Probably if you're doing some of these tract homes, new builds, they say that you also have to provide to them in order to do one, you got to provide your workman's comp insurance. Not every home inspector carries a workman's comp policy. Reasons for that are you may be a multi-inspector firm and that's covered by your firm. Another would be you have, say, a spouse that carries the insurance coverage for you and you're an independent home inspector. In those cases, you can typically argue that fact with the tract builder and they'll let you go in. And you'll also see some of the tract builders, they're saying, well, you can't remove the cover from the electric panel, or you can't put your ladder on the roof, or you can't walk on the roof. Well, those are different issues altogether. In my area, I was able to successfully argue against a couple of tract builders about removing the cover of the electric panel. I was threatened with jail time by a city electrical inspector, and I told him he better call the police because I'm taking it off. And he never called the police. So we just kind of go through things and learn as we go. Here's the application requirements. There's a question that's come up several times is reciprocity. And so in here, the commissioner may grant a license as a home inspector to an individual who holds a like unexpired license in good standing as a home inspector in that state. And here's the big if: the requirements for licensure are at least equivalent to the requirements of Tennessee. So if one of the examples I run into is a guy was licensed in Kentucky and he wanted to be licensed in Tennessee and he was denied. The reason for denial was at the time, Kentucky only required 45 hours of class time, where Tennessee requires 90 hours. So before this individual could be licensed in Tennessee, he had to take an additional 45 hours of class time before he would be permitted to be licensed in Tennessee. So that's just kind of one example. There's several states now that have upped that requirement to as much as 105 hours of class time, education class time before licensure. So,
Tim,
yes,
I've run across this a couple times, and what seems to be consistent is the state requires the person wanting the reciprocal license to take 32 hours of CE classes that are approved for Tennessee.
yes, that's another requirement that falls in is the CE requirements. So, and I always find that kind of odd is that we have to have 32 hours of CE every 2 years to be renewed. And you go talk to doctors and nurses and other different professions, we have more CE requirements than a doctor every 2 years to maintain licensure. And boy, does that seem odd to me. But that's the way the law is written. So, uh, anyone wanting to do that shall file with the commissioner the required application form and fee, along with proof that the applicant holds a current valid license as a home inspector in another state. So there is one other exception in that reciprocity, and that covers someone that's military. And then there'll be a temporary permit issued while the rest of the issues are worked through, because military tends to move people around a lot. So now we start looking at our renewal requirements. These are all things that are necessary in order to renew, which we all understand those. Uh, the rule shall expire 2 years from the date of its issuance and shall become invalid on such date unless renewed. Well, there's a grace period in there. They don't the next day they don't automatically shut you off. There'll be some correspondence, and it would be in your best interest if you let the state know what you're doing to fulfill a shortfall. And I do know a couple of cases where that has happened, um, where someone had to get some additional hours of education after their licensure expired, and the state permitted that. And that's perfectly fine. They've written in that exception, and it works for you. So it really helps to stay on top of your CE hours to make sure you fall in line, which as a HITA member, we typically offer, 55, 60 hours of CE credit every 2 years. So if you attend some meetings and the expo, you're easily going to get your 32 hours. So when you reapply, this is okay. Here's a aspect that you really want to pay attention to. Only submit 32 hours. So when you go for your licensure, only submit the 32 hours that's required. And here's the reason why. One of the HITA members submitted a course that had happened 4 years prior. Okay, CE credits do not expire. If you took a course that you had not submitted and you took it 4 years, 6 years, 8 years ago, you can still use that course in order to get your license renewed. So keep track of what you submit and only submit 32 hours for your renewal.
But you can only use that once. You can't use it 3 times in that one
That's
class.
correct. Any course you submit can only be used one time. So if you take 60 hours of CE in that 2 years, well, save up 28 of them that you can use later on. Just don't submit them to the state. Only submit the 32.
So, I will disagree with you. So you can submit all of them. They will hold them and use them the following year, because I've done that several times.
Have you had that happen, Lee?
Yes. Yep.
Where
Last year,
they
last time I renewed, I needed no CEUs because I already had enough CEUs historically in taken, so I didn't have to submit anything else.
and you got renewed?
Yep.
And so they archive that. Well, that's astonishing.
So they upload them into their computer. It's part of the whole new system. You can upload them early. You don't have to wait till you submit your license. Yeah, but it's the state. So I always go back and ask them, "Hey, did you get my CEUs that I submitted?" A few weeks later, to make sure that they actually put it in the system.
Cool. But to Tim's point, like, over the 2 year period, so if we had 40, 45 CEs that we've got through classes and we submit all those, they're going to hold the other one, the additional in reserve, and will apply, let's say, for the next term, I guess, is just to make sure I'm
Yep.
hearing that.
Yep. That
Well,
is that is
I
that
think I
that is
think
what I have. That's what's happened with me.
I've also seen where it's been depending on who processes your request. So some of the workers in the office process different than others, and so it's not consistent. You need
That's
to, I
interesting.
think it's best behooves you to manage it yourself, then you don't have any arguments with people.
Right. Switching gears a little bit on that, where my mind went, and I've thought about this over time, is there any discussion within the state, not, whether or not it's initiated by us on like, hey, can we get CE credits for other things? Like if we want to do a radon certification, we got radon certified. Is there any plans on being able to roll that into, yeah, if this comes from a particular radon organization, you get, 2 or 3 credits. Any conversation about
There, some of the radon courses are already approved, and you get 16 hours. The radon measurement certification, the one through InterNACHI, the one through Kansas State University, and several other independent providers is already approved. I don't think any of the mitigation um, courses are approved for CEUs for home inspectors, um, but I do know the measurement is.
good to know. Did not know that.
It's up to the course provider to get it approved with the state.
So another tidbit of information, if you're thinking about getting registered, certified for measurement, which I highly recommend, reach out to the state radon program. Every year they offer free training through last 3 years. It's been through Kansas State University, which they're the people that run the national 1-800 radon number. They've come into the area to do the training, and it's free. Like they did the whole mitigation course. This year they did the measurement standards course and the mitigation course for free.
Well, yeah, I'm certified. I've been doing testing for years. I just have never applied for or used it for CE. So that's good to know.
Yep.
Yep. Because we had Bruce Need, he was the director for this program with Kansas State University, and we've had him at 2 expos now. And he's also conducted CE courses for HITA uh, on radon. So, but Lee is absolutely correct. You can take 10 home inspectors a year can take the 16-hour course through Kansas State University, and it's online. And then that also allows you, if you want, you can actually get the NRPP certification, which has a 2-year expiration on it, also, if you get that certification. So that's always good news. Free stuff is way better than having to pay for it. And when you're looking at 16 hours of CE, that's not cheap if you pay somebody else. Okay. Um, Credit, and here's a big one that we work on is credit shall not be granted for a repeated course within the 3-year time period unless the course has undergone a significant update. So um, that kind of leads to one of the concerns that HITA continually raises with the state is that the standards of practice and the ethics should be taught every 2 years. And the state's argument is every course approved by the state is a standards of practice course. And so that's why they won't drop that specific requirement. So whether you're taking an electrical course, a structural course, plumbing course, no matter what, the state considers that a standards of practice course. Okay, here we go. We'll move on. All right. So in this rule 0780-05-12, we'll continue on part 3, A through C. So home inspections performed according to this rule shall provide the client with an understanding of property conditions at the time of the home inspection. And here you've got 10 things listed: heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, structural components and foundations, roof coverings, exterior components, interior components, insulation and ventilation, and built-in kitchen appliances. Okay. So the state recognizes 10 things, and all these are in the shall. You shall perform a visual inspection, which we all know that's a very limited number of tools that we have at our disposal during an inspection. So in part 3B, under the rules provided by the commissioner, the home inspector shall provide a written contract signed by the client or the client's legal representative, and it shall state that the home inspection will be in accordance with the standards of practice promulgated by the commissioner. So if your agreement or your report does not list that you will comply with the standards of practice promulgated by the commissioner, you're not in compliance. It is perfectly acceptable to also state you follow INTRNACHI's or ASHI's standards of practice. That's perfectly fine. But you must say that you're going to follow the standards of practice for the state of Tennessee. That's a no-brainer. It's a shall. You shall do that. So be sure you get that in your agreement, and it also has to be listed in your report. Okay? That's in both of them. Now, in your contract, they'll say this is specifically about the contract right now. So it's saying that those words have to be in your contract. It also says describe what services shall be provided and their cost. So if you're going to include a radon test, you either need a separate radon contract or you can include it as part of your inspection agreement. If you're offering mold testing, mold analysis, if you're going to offer, which you can't offer a structural analysis unless you're a PE, professional engineer. Believe it or not, there is no such thing as a structural engineer. There is the only one identified in the state of Tennessee is a professional engineer. So then you state the name or state the home inspection report will not address the items set forth in parts 5A4 and 5 of the rule. Okay, so your report has to have all these things listed. And it's a statement that the report does not address the environmental hazards of, so, and all these words have to be in your report, lead-based paint, radon, asbestos, all those 11 things that we talked about earlier. So those words have to be part of your report. And a statement that the report does not address the subterranean systems, those three things, your sewage, disposal, your water supply, and any fuel storage or delivery. So put those words in your report. So they're part of your contract, as we saw earlier, and it's part of your report. Those words have to be repeated in both documents when you issue a home inspection report or get an agreement signed.
Do
And
we know
questions?
why they have to be in both? Do we know why they have to be in both? Because I mean, I've had those in the agreement. I don't. So I'm learning here. I don't have those in my report.
Yeah, and Jim, that's the reason we're doing this is because of the 300 plus reports and agreements that I've gone through. This one here trips up a great many people because they don't, one, they typically don't have it in their agreement, and they definitely don't have it in their report. And so that's the reason for this course is because HITA wants to help you not get exposed to problems if someone complains to the state or if someone files litigation against you. We really want to help you avoid those instances.
No, well, and I appreciate that. The question was, I mean, do we know why they have to be in both documents since they're actually signing the agreement? But why it also has to be in.
Because the commissioner said so and he won't change his mind.
Okay, Good enough.
Yeah, and that's quite simple. As Mr. Kopchak put it to me, he says, "That's part of my prerogative." Okay.
I,
That's
Do as I
Tim,
say, not
and
as
I'll,
I
I'll,
do.
I'll throw a reason why out there. The person signing the agreement may not be the person reading the report.
that's a real possibility. Yeah.
Tim, my inspection agreement is when I email it, it's also attached to my report.
Hmm.
Is that sufficient or do I need to put that somewhere else
If
in the
it's
report?
And that's going to be a legal question there, whether that's considered suitable. Is your agreement actually part of your report?
Yes, mine is.
And so that's going to be a situation that the lawyers are going to have to hash out. Are they two separate documents or can they be one?
Yeah, that's a great
Where would
question.
you recommend putting it in the report, that statement?
I put it in my report. Um, of course, it's when I get the agreement signed, that's one document. And then
Mhm.
I include it as part of my report, just simply so they have a printed copy. Because most of the realtors that I worked with, they print out a copy of the home inspection report and hand it to their clients.
I
Which,
email mine to my clients.
oh, so do I. Yeah,
Yeah.
so do I. But most of the realtors that I work with, they will also
Mhm.
print it out, and they actually most of them will actually put it in a book that they share with their clients.
Okay.
And they use that as part of the negotiation process, because that's the reason we have a job is so that they can negotiate the price downward on a home that they're buying.
Let me ask you a question on that too. There's at least one uh, realty company that they don't want their agents to see the reports, whether they're the buyer or the seller's agent.
Yeah,
So they don't want the report.
yeah. Personally, I don't do business with agents from those groups um, because of that stance. So
They're not
that's
representing
going
their
to
client.
that's going to be when they open your report. Does your report format indicate to you that they opened the report and who opened it?
It does. No.
Okay, so the report format I use, anybody that opens my report or
Mhm.
my contract is documented at what time they opened it, the IP address that opened it, and the time they closed it. And it also indicates did they save it somewhere. So those are all good things. Um, that's one of the reasons that makes some of these online reporting formats a bit more valuable than writing your own. In the fact that you get an automatic documentation of when it was opened and who opened it.
My contract, it does. It
Okay.
says who opened it, where, what time and everything.
Yeah. Groups like ISN, they do
Mhm.
document things like that. So there's quite a few inspectors who appear to use ISN for their bookings and things, and they document emails and they document agreements, different things. So it's always good. Documentation and photographs are always going to be your friend, whether you're addressing a complaint with the state or whether you're addressing litigation. Um, Documentation is frequently more friendly than adversary. So, um, any other questions about that part of it? Getting those words put into your report.
No, okay.
Okay.
Where do you put it in your report, Tim?
Right at the very front, I
Okay.
have a thank you letter, and that goes right in the front of the report. So it says, "Thank you for using me." And
Okay.
oh, by the way, the state says I got to tell you this. So,
Okay.
uh,
Okay. I can do that because that's when I send my email, I have a thank you letter uh,
Yeah.
with mine.
And, also in my report, of course, I use Horizon. I just like their report format better than anybody else. They have a subsection called limitations, and I list the standards of practice of the area I'm working on in my limitations. So they get to read that in every report that I issue. Things that I am obligated to do, things I'm not obligated to do. I always viewed that as a highlight to my compliance, how my clients, how I exceeded the standards of practice in their report and in their reporting. But that's just me. Everybody's going to run their business a little bit differently, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. So we look at purpose and scope. When an inspection is for only one or a limited number of systems or components, that the inspection is limited to only those systems or components. So this is saying you can do a limited scope inspection, but you have to say in your agreement that's what you're doing. Okay. So if they only want you to inspect the crawl space, this, in my view, presents a dilemma. Okay, you want me to inspect the crawl space. What do you want me to inspect for? Structure, HVAC, electrical, plumbing? What do you want? And so getting that defined clearly and early is going to determine the price you charge for one thing, but it's also going to define what you need to list in your agreement of what you're going to inspect. So if someone says, no, I want you to go to the crawl space and only inspect it structurally, what are you going to tell them if they have a plumbing leak or an imminent fire hazard because of the way the wiring is run? You going to tell them? You didn't get paid for it. So think about those things in your agreements when you agree to do a limited scope home inspection for somebody. Does anybody have any questions about that? And what you got was my opinion right there. And I know I'm not the king of all good ideas. So if you want to disagree with me, I'm perfectly fine with that. Let's have a discussion about a limited scope inspection as it pertains to your agreement and your report.
I don't do them.
Okay. I don't either. I will not do a limited
Because
scope
I had
inspection.
one, what you're saying is I was inspecting something they asked me to inspect. And then they came back and said, well, you didn't report this in your report. And I said, I wasn't looking for that. So I just don't do them anymore.
I
Yeah.
do them and I write it in my contract of like, say they just want the foundation only on the, and so I write in the contract that it's a foundation only inspection. It doesn't cover anything else. It's specific to the foundation or it's a roof inspection and that's it. That's how I write it in my contracts. It's very specific to the component that I'm inspecting. And I have verbiage in my contract to that.
Okay. If there's a plumbing leak, would you tell them?
Yeah, just out of courtesy. But if it's in the, let's say it's in the crawl space, yes, because that's in the crawl space area, then yes, absolutely. Because I
Okay.
consider that part of the crawl space foundation.
Okay.
Because water does affect the um the hydrostatic pressure and all that and the in that mold. So when I do a foundation, that's kind of like the crawl space. So I look at it as a whole, not
Okay.
just the wall or the piers.
So here's an interesting question. Would you tell the homeowner that they got a plumbing leak?
I'd ask permission. What I do is I ask permission from the buyer because it's not a safety issue. Unless it's a safety issue, I can't disclose it, and that's based on confidentiality agreements.
Sewage is a safety issue.
He said
So I would
plumbing, so
tell
that
them.
I would say water. Sewage is safety, but water is not.
Yep. Would agree with that.
Okay. Anybody else? How would you address something with the homeowners when you're doing a home inspection.
So
What
it's
if you saw,
I will say it's a gray area. If it's a leak and it's dripping right on an electrical box, I probably would tell them, hey, you know, it's there's a whole lot of gray area in that.
I
there
break
really
it
is.
down based on safety. Any disclosure where I'm allowed to
Yeah.
disclose is if it's a safety concern to the homeowner, absolutely all day long, I will tell them. And my customers know that. So I have that in my contract. If there's a safety issue to health, life, whatever, I'm allowed to disclose for that very reason.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, to me, it's almost a common sense thing. I mean, if I've got, because I do major systems only inspections as well, and if I'm on site, to Mark's point, if I'm looking at a roof, but I mean, it's almost that's part of ethics, providing a good service in general. If I see like a big structural crack or something on the brick veneer, and I walk right by that and say, "Oh, well, sorry, that wasn't on my contract." I mean, you're not really performing a good service. Yeah, you're looking at the roof, that's what you were contracted for. But if you want to get a good reputation, I wouldn't walk around ignoring things that are obvious visually. That's kind of my rule of thumb.
Yeah.
If you look at the terms or the description of your license, it has something in there to the point that you have an obligation to the public. And that is the safety of anybody who happens to come into that house, owner, visitor, whatever. You have an obligation to that public to keep them safe.
Yep. Agree 100%.
So I probably would report a plumbing leak because there's probably also electrical lines in the crawl space. And so the potential, I mean, even though it may be minimal, the potential is for someone to get into a precarious situation and have a shocking experience. And so, yeah.
Okay, so Tim, come on off the top rope and bring the flying elbow down on everybody. Where are we at with this?
No, I'll tell you what I do because I've been asked so many times is when the homeowners are there and I have access to them, I explain to them that it is against the law for me to tell them anything that I discover. I am perfectly willing to violate the law under two conditions. If you have a plumbing leak that you're not aware of, I'm going to tell you. If you have an imminent fire hazard that you're not aware of, I'm going to tell you. If you would like me to turn, if you would like to turn me into the state for knowingly violating law, I will show them how to do it. And all of them have, to date, all of them look at me and they go, why would I turn you into the state for telling me something like that? Well, because it's technically against the law. And so that's how I address that situation. Same way when my clients are walking up to the house, if there's no safety railing on the stairs, I'll say, okay, technically, I got to tell you that it's not safe for you to walk up these steps because there's no handrail or the handrail's not compliant. Um, just silly little things. It makes people laugh, and it kind of eases some of the tension that a buyer gets when they're looking at a house and spending a ton of money. That's my personal view of how I address those types of things. Okay.
But to
So once
Joe's
again, we've
point,
reached our 50 minutes. Do you want to continue or do you want to take a 10?
I say push through.
Okay.
But to Joe's point, where it's the interest of public safety, the
Mhm.
disclosure, that's not breaking the law if it's in the interest of public safety.
There again, you got a gray area, something that lawyers will hash out. Um, and I continually point to this issue that a judge put out in West Tennessee that says you're not responsible for gross negligence. Um,
It's
who,
all opinion. It's
I think
all
that's a
depending.
great. I think that's a great thing. You're not responsible for gross negligence because, and I'll just say this, and I know you totally disagree with me on that, but home inspectors are the most sued of all the trades. We're the ones that get sued the most, with the most complaints. So
Mhm.
I don't feel bad that the judge ruled that way. I was laughing at it. It's bad, but at the same time, I'm like, great. I can't get sued if I put that in my, as much of a screw up as I am or anybody else, they can't sue me. Great, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
yeah, that's we will forever disagree on that, Mark. I agree with you there. I think it's not uh, part of what a home inspection should be when you're there to protect your client, and then suddenly you tell them, "Well, I'm technically not responsible for anything," which, in my view, means all you really need to do is drive by, take a picture of the front of the house, and then you're done. Collect the money.
Well, Tim, I didn't say it was right or
I
ethical
know.
for that matter.
Oh, I
What I'm
know.
saying is
Yeah.
going back to the point of the laws with like the ice cream in your underwear and the alligator tied to your house, whatever, they have all sorts of stupid laws. So why can't we have something in our favor? That's all I'm saying.
There you
Yeah.
So,
go.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that part I agree. And that's why in HITA, we have continually worked with the state to get not a limitation of liability, but a statute of limitations. Um, so that if you look at the laws from the state of Ohio, when they wrote their home inspector licensing law, they put a 1 year statute of limitations in law. And that's one of the better written laws of all of them that I've looked at is, holding a home inspector responsible for a home in perpetuity, which is the way Tennessee's law is written. If you do a home inspection in Tennessee, you're pretty much liable. You have greater liability than the people that designed the home or built the home. And that doesn't seem fair to me.
That's why I said that law with the negligence and the gross negligence is okay by me because of the
Yeah.
perpetuity stuff.
That part we may agree on, Mark.
Which in reality is we're all underpaid if that's, for that situation.
I agree, Terry. Yep. Yep. Raise the price. Now, we're not colluding on price fixing, but yeah, raise your price. Okay. So since I got no dissent, we'll continue on. All right. And boy, this is going to be a fun one here in discussion. Inspect readily visible and readily accessible installed systems and components listed in the rule. And there's your 10 things. So you got to inspect all of those things. And then it begins to break down what each of those things are and what they are not.
Can we have, I heard this once several years ago. I can't remember where. So interesting, back previous slide. Um, do we know if there is a difference as far as the state is concerned between what is readily accessible or easily accessible?
Okay, this is present an interesting point. One of our home inspectors members, he removed the cover from a gas pack unit and reported rust inside the cabinet. The seller was a realtor and complained to the state that a home inspector removing the cover from that gas pack unit was against the law and against the standards of practice, and submitted the complaint to the state, or submitted a ruling from the state, not a complaint. The reply from the state, the first sentence was, according to Chat GPT, it is illegal for a home inspector to remove that cover. Boy, as soon as I got that, I filed with the state to get that clarified, because it is not against the standards to remove that cover. You are not required to remove it, but you are not prohibited from removing it.
I think you mentioned at the expo. Yes.
Yes. just like we talked about at the expo. This is a classic case where some of the people answering those emails with the state aren't particularly well trained. Okay, so they should not be saying, according to Chat GPT, when that's not what's written in the rules and the law.
Well, according to Abraham Lincoln, Tim, you shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet.
Well, if it's on the internet, it's got to be true, right?
Right. Well,
Right.
I had a similar, not to digress into, and
That's called a hallucination.
oh, right. I had a realtor. She got kind of ugly with me on this was years ago. That I had lifted the plastic vapor barrier, like a foot of it to see because I, saw some signs of moisture in the crawl space and took some pictures and called out the moisture underneath the plastic. And she thought she knew my job better than me and said, "Is this not a limited vision?" I mean, use the terminology, limited visual inspection, and I'm going to call my attorney because you flipped up the plastic and took a picture of the moisture underneath. Yeah, so never heard from her attorney though.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you're not, Jim. He probably laughed her right out of his office. Okay, so in this part, it says you shall submit a written report to the client that shall, at a minimum. Now, here's in one of the cases I'm working on now, we're going to get right into the meat of this. Describe those systems and components required to be described in paragraphs 7 through 16 of this rule. Okay, so 7 through 16 is all your heating, cooling, electrical, all those 10 things. Okay, so you got to describe all those systems and their components that are required to be described. And then here's the part that's one of the cases I'm working on now, part 3B2. State in the report which systems and components designated for inspection in this rule have been inspected, and state any systems or components designated for inspection that were not inspected and the reason for not inspecting. Okay. Now, under this particular section of the standards of practice, one of the strengths of people's report that where they write their own is they typically have check boxes in there. And in those check boxes, they'll say something like, I inspected the toilets. Okay. Where some of the online reporting, they don't have those check boxes. So it obliges you to list in your report that you did inspect the toilet and you flushed it. And so this is a real contentious report in one of the cases that I'm working on where there was the plaintiffs are saying there's no evidence that the home inspector inspected my toilets. There's no evidence they inspected my faucets. And so because the report didn't say they did it. Now, so this is going to catch some people because in a lot of the reports I look at, if it's not deficient, it doesn't get listed. So start looking at your report and thinking about this. How do you prove that you tested a faucet or flushed a toilet, that you inspected a floor, that you inspected drywall, or even all of the aspects that the paragraphs 7 through 16 of the rule require you to inspect? How do you document that you inspected them? So this is a big one that you really should consider very closely in your report. How do you prove you inspected these things? Again, here's a situation where photographs greatly help. So taking a lot of pictures is always going to be your friend. Um, uh, we asked that question in one of our site meetings one time. We had about 50 home inspectors when we were at United Structural Systems. And the question was asked by a show of hands, how many of you take 50 or fewer photos in a report or in an inspection? And maybe 6 or 7 people raised their hand. And then how many take 50 to 100? And then finally, it came to the point, how many people take more, 250 or more photographs in a report? And not all that many people raised their hands. And that's something that personally I have been doing for an extremely long time. Digital photographs are easy because one of the things that we go through here later on, you're going to see that you are obligated by the rules to maintain all records of a home inspection for a minimum of 3 years. Pictures, all your photographs, your report, your agreement, anything that you generated as a result of your home inspection, you should maintain for at least 3 years. Okay. And then we go to part three, state any system or component so inspected that do not function as intended, allowing for normal wear and tear or adversely affect the habitability of the dwelling. Okay. So this is the part pretty much everybody generally tends to get right. When something's deficient, it gets listed. Um, Most of the reports that I look at, they'll have a picture of the deficiency. Um, One of the things that gets confusing that I see that plaintiffs will state is the photograph will be kind of a micro view of the deficiency. And so some of the better reports that I look at, they actually take two pictures. They take a macro view photograph and then a micro view. So the macro kind of pinpoints a location. The micro view identifies the defect. And so that becomes a more palatable report to a client uh, to help them identify location and identify defect. So all things to think about. Digital photographs are a whole lot cheaper. It's always recommended that you have not just on-site storage of those documents, but additionally off-site storage of those documents. And that really came to light a few years back when a home inspector's home burnt and all of his records were gone. Um, so off-site storage is pretty inexpensive. Personally, I have 8 terabyte off-site storage in order to maintain all of my documents and all of my photographs, and then periodically purge them. In a former life that I have in a research and development engineering facility, the company got sued, and the lawyers came into our facility and said, "You must now purge everything that's more than 3 years old." That included a lots of historical education components, different things, but you know, out the door it went. A lot of stuff went to the recyclers, and a lot of stuff got dumped and burnt. Um, how you approach your business, I'll leave that entirely up to you and your attorney. We go to part four. State whether the condition reported requires repair. And here's two very simple words that is recommended to replace the complex word monitor. Those two words the state gives you are subsequent observation. That's determined by the state to be much more understood by the general public than the word monitor. So you state repair, subsequent observation, or warrants further investigation by a specialist. Um, and this goes back to a question I asked you earlier. If you state subsequent observation, or okay, let's go back and use a repair. If you state that something requires repair, should you state who should do the repair? Can it be a handyman, a licensed contractor, plumber? Um, Here's a thought you should put into what you write in your report. If you state subsequent observation, should you list a time frame? How often should they subsequently observe something that you identified in the report? Should they do it annually? Should they do it monthly? So a subsequent observation indicates that it's not currently defective, but it warranted enough to make the report. And then if you say it warrants further investigation by a specialist, who should do it? Who should do the investigation? Their brother-in-law, their next door neighbor, um, a handyman, a licensed specialist? Should you list in your report who should do the further investigation? So quite commonly, that will be something that is typically outside of the scope of standards of practice. And let me give you an example. In one of the cases I'm working on, there was a water heater and they used PEX plumbing right at the top of the water heater. Okay. So in my investigation of this litigation, I went and looked at the manufacturer's installation instructions. Okay. I'm not a codes inspector. I don't pretend to be. The manufacturer does not prohibit attaching PEX to their fittings in a water heater.
Was it a gas water heater or was it electric? Because I believe gas does restrict that.
It was a gas water heater. And in this case, the water heater was a Bradford White gas powered water heater. Their manufacturer's installation instructions do not prohibit PEX. So when we looked at it, I looked at the age of the water heater. It was 9 years old. It had been plumbed with this PEX for 9 years, and there was no signs of degradation. So in this case, that portion of the lawsuit is going to get tossed because the manufacturer did not prohibit it. And the person that installed it not according to code, because the plumbing code says you can't do that. But it wasn't a plumber that put it in, it was a homeowner. And so he used PEX. Nice and convenient, simple. Put it on, move on. It had not failed, and it was 9 years old. So that part of this lawsuit, I expect, is probably going to get tossed out, that particular component. So the manufacturer's installation instructions you'll typically find in home inspection are you're going to be your friend, because in what you're looking at, does it meet the manufacturer's installation instructions versus what does the code say? And on an investigation that I did while this lawsuit was being put through, I found a plumber had connected PEX to a gas water heater, and it passed the codes inspection on this brand new house. They had a CO on the house. So codes isn't perfect either. Kind of like humans. They're humans too. Okay. And then we get to part 5. This is important because, and I'll bring up the reasons, but you shall state the name, the license number, and the signature of the person conducting the inspection. Okay. The state gets real picky about your name, and they get real picky about your license number being on there. In my experience, the state doesn't really care if you sign it. even though they require it, I have never seen where the state penalized a home inspector on a complaint because they didn't sign the report. I've never been involved in any litigation that the lawyers were going to hang their hat on a failure to sign the report. They do hang their hats in litigation that your name and license number be on there. The signature, nobody seems to care about. So I'm going to leave that to you, whether you need to sign your reports. And I'm also not going to ask you by a show of hands how many don't put your signature on the report, because there's a business decision you're going to have to wrangle with. Okay. So auditing your report practices, the power of shall. So this is not a standards of practice course. We will not address part 4 of the standards because there's the word shall doesn't appear in there anywhere. Now, I have been pressing the state to give me the course number for this course, and they have not sent me their approval letter yet. And as of last night, it doesn't show up on the state's website. So I'll continue to press that as we process your certificates for today. So in part 5A, items 1 through 6, which is required reporting. So in the November 2024 standards of practice, part 5A only had items 1 through 5. In the January 2026 standards of practice, they added item number 6. So when we get to number 6, this is something that you must list in your report. Okay? So in part 5A, the home inspection report shall include all of the following, which is a report on any system or component inspected that, in the opinion of the home inspector, is significantly deficient. So that's kind of one that everybody tends to fall into. And then in part 5A2, a list of any systems or components that were designated for inspection in this rule, but that were not inspected. Now, you see these capitalized words in part 2? This is part of your report, including underfloor crawl spaces, basements, and attic spaces. Okay? So if you didn't inspect any of those things, you must say so in your report. And those words got to be part of your report.
You also have to list the reason why.
Yes, you do, because that's number 3. The reason a system or component listed in accordance with part 5A2 was not inspected. So if you couldn't get into the crawl space because it's only 1 block high and 1 block wide, there's not many home inspectors can fit in that small of an opening. The state does not recognize the dimensions of an opening that's too small to enter. So kind of one of the rule of thumbs I think I see in a lot of different areas, they'll say, well, it's got to be at least 13 inches high and 25 inches wide. And I've never seen that in any law or any standard, but that's kind of one of what I've seen people say, the rule of thumb kind of thing. Well, if I can get in there, I go. If I can get in and go safely. In one of the inspections I did, the opening was nice and big. Problem I couldn't get into it was the plumbing and the HVAC ductwork that ran across that opening. I wasn't Gumby enough to fit there.
Yep.
So if that's the case, take a picture of why you couldn't get there. Sometimes you may want to use your tape measure to measure the opening as part of your documentation, but document it. Put in there exactly why you could not inspect something. And even things that I can fit through, I still take pictures of things that I can fit through as part of my documentation. And we get to number 4, part 5. This is all in required reporting, things you shall do. A statement that the report does not address these environmental hazards, including. Now, you shall list this in your report. It says so right in the standards of practice. This knocks out just about everybody. Just about every report that I have audited fails this section.
Yeah, I'm
So,
toast.
yeah, go ahead.
I said, yeah, I'm toast on that one.
Yeah, well, uh, like I say, it doesn't matter unless someone complains to the state or files a lawsuit. Then it really matters. Yeah, lawyers love words, and words matter. So make sure you get all of these 11 things listed as part of your report. This is 5A4, which is in the law and it's in the standards of practice. So here's part 5A5, which is your sewage disposal, water supply, fuel storage, and delivery. That has to be listed in your report, as well as your home inspection agreement. It's a no-brainer. It's a shall. You shall do these things. Yeah. It doesn't prohibit you from listing additional things, such as some of the things that InterNACHI recommends, some of the things that ASHI recommends, some of the things that your attorney or your contract lawyer may recommend you do. Okay. So if you're going to list that you perform your inspection per InterNACHI or ASHI or somebody else's standards, which some of the home inspection schools, they list their own standards of practice, which is perfectly fine. You can say you do that. And if they have some things, and if you say you're going to follow their standards and they've got something different than what the state of Tennessee says, go ahead and put it in there because you said you did. So, in auditing classes, and I was an auditor for about 12 years. The two tenets of an audit is when you're going through something is say what you do and then do what you say. So this is a say what you do thing that you're going to comply with these standards. And here's
I'm
part
sorry.
6. Yes.
I'm sorry. Could you back up to the previous slide real quick? I just want to get a snapshot. One
This
more.
one here.
No, one more.
This one here.
There we go. Yes, yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. If you
Okay,
want to
yeah,
take a
thank you.
screenshot, I'll let
That's fine.
everybody know we're planning to take this class and make it available for review on our website. We're
Oh,
trying to
perfect.
figure out how you can get 4 hours CE for viewing it, but we haven't gotten through that hurdle yet. But once we get this class is being recorded, so you'll be able to go back and review this at a later date. Okay. Yeah, this is important. We like to keep our members out of trouble. The rest of the home inspectors in the state we could give two hoots about, but we want our members to not fall into this category. Okay, so here's item 6. A statement explaining a home inspection is a visual analysis for the purpose of providing a professional opinion as defined by Tennessee Code Annotated, which is the law, and does not include the measures listed in Tennessee Code Annotated 62-6-302 Part 3B. If you want to look that up, dig right in. And so this is a new addition to the standards of practice that was added on January 22nd, 2026. Okay. So two very recent changes that you have to your disposal. One is the updated standards for January 2026. The other rule that you now can use as a home inspector is the ability to seek a personal professional letter from the state. Now, when you get that, it only applies to you in this and that particular case. But you can file that with the state and you'll get a professional opinion from the AG, the Attorney General's office. Okay. And so that's what I did after this new rule was enacted, is the home inspector that removed that panel cover from the gas pack unit, we sought a professional opinion from the Attorney General's office, and it sided with HIDA's view that it is perfectly acceptable to remove that cover. You're not obligated to remove it, but you certainly are not prohibited from removing it.
I have a question about this new rule. We know what it is because I get notified like you do of the new rule changes. But do they send this to all the home inspectors across the state of Tennessee, or is that just they're tough shit if they don't figure it out?
They do not send that out. It is, you are responsible for your business. If you choose not to be notified of these changes, then you're in America, you're free to be as ignorantly bliss as you want. And from what I'm finding, very few home inspectors get notified of these changes. Here's one of the advantages of being a member of the Home Inspectors of Tennessee Association is we're going to tell you when this comes out, we're telling you, we're notifying you by email, hey, changes are coming down the road and here's what they are. How do you feel about it? And then we follow that up with, if you want to complain about these changes, where you can meet, when you can meet with the state and list your objections to their changes. And so HIDA keeps you apprised of all of that stuff. That's part of what we do. That's part of what your benefits are as a dues paying member to the Home Inspectors of Tennessee Association. So if you know some inspectors that are not part of this group, let them know what they're missing out. Because in group emails, there's a law called can spam. And so when you try to send out an unsolicited email, it probably goes to their junk mail. Good chance of it. So there's some options that you have as a home inspector to stay apprised. You can go to the tn.gov website and you can sign up for all those notifications if you want to. Personally, I have signed up for home inspectors, contractors, and realtors, and I stay apprised of that. Couple reasons. My son's a contractor and my daughter is a realtor. So I want to make sure they know things are coming their way too. So just more stuff that should be a part of your business. Okay. In part 6, general exclusions. The home inspectors shall not. Okay, now we're going to get into a discussion. A home inspector shall not offer or perform any act or service contrary to law. Okay, that's very important. Contrary to law. In part 2, it says offer or perform engineering, architectural, plumbing, electrical, or any other job function requiring a license in this state for the same client unless the client is advised thereof and consents thereto. Okay, that's the way the SOP is written. The standards of practice, this is what it says. So let's look at what the law says. So the standards of practice calls out all these specific licensed professions. The law, TCA 62-6-308, is called the disciplinary powers of the commissioner. In that law, it says performing or offering to perform repair or maintenance work on a property that you have inspected in the preceding 12 months. It also says using a home inspection with the intention to obtain work in another field or profession. So, if you're faced in a position where you have to say those two words, Your Honor, which one of those two do you think a judge will hang his hat on? The standards of practice or the law that says you're not going to perform any repair or maintenance work for 12 months after you've done the inspection?
Tim, it
Yeah.
doesn't say it, but it doesn't say shall not.
Yes, it does. This is a cutout of the law. And so you shall not perform or offer to perform repair or maintenance work for 12 months. It also says you cannot use your home inspection with the intention to obtain work in another field or profession. So if you're doing this, you have the potential to expose yourself to risk. So
Question.
you can be a licensed electrician, and according to the standards of practice, if you tell your client you're a licensed electrician and you offer to fix things for them, you would be okay by the standards. In your personal or your attorney's interpretation, are you outside of the law?
So would that also apply with ancillary services such as radon testing? I do testing, but I've also contemplated getting into the mitigation business. Now, obviously, mitigation companies do their own testing and they do their own mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks consider that a conflict of interest. I mean, doing testing is a little more structured, it's a little more scientific, as long as you've got calibrated devices and follow protocols. So it's a little hard to say, you're cheating to get the work. But would that last clause on this slide also apply to radon in that case?
Yes. Jim, that is a great point. And that is something that HITA has argued with the state is that the standards writing and the law writing conflict. And so we have asked continually, we've been asking this question for about 8 years because I'm the one asking the question, is this needs to be clarified. So we've got home inspectors doing ancillary work, radon, mold, what have you. How is that okay? But you can't tell them that I'm also a painter. I can paint
Right.
the inside of your house.
Yeah.
How do these things not conflict with each other the way they're written?
Well, Tim, my son has a mitigation company, a volunteer radon, and we've done inspections where Jeremy's worked with me on one and the radon came back high, but he won't install the system on that house because
Yeah.
he's also a licensed home inspector.
Yeah. And that's part of some of the business decisions that we have to make as we proceed through our business, because most of the members of HITA are independents. We're not too many of us are part of a multi-inspector firm. So this is something that you're going to have to wrangle with, maybe something you want to discuss with your attorney about how you're doing business and what's permitted and what is not permitted. Because those two statements, in the opinion of the Home Inspectors of Tennessee Association, are conflicting.
Yeah. Well, you know, and a lot of inspectors that in the past and at the present that you talk to, they're doing the standards, but they're not interpreting the law. They're not following the law because it's not in the standards of practice.
Yes. Yeah. And where that really comes to light is not so much if someone complains to the state, but it does come to light in litigation. The attorneys generally tend and judges generally tend to hang more emphasis on law than standards, where it's written specifically. So, but yeah, the floor is open for discussion on this about your opinion or your own personal practice, or how life has affected you as a home inspector.
Tim, a quick question. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but this does kind of get the wheels. So, and this, I think somebody touched on this briefly at the expo as well, was so, you know, we're talking standards of practice. This is the minimum. Most of us operate, you know, above the standard of practice. Um, and I've heard over the years, you know, well, what's the community standard? So, in other words, if there is something that you didn't do, it's not within the standards of practice. It's not stated here. It's not part of the law, but it's part of the community standard in your um, uh, community. As far as Nashville, say Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, Tennessee, whatever. That's what most of the other home inspectors are doing. Do judges follow? I mean, because to me, that's almost how then do you define community standard if you ever got sued? Is like, how do you just, because if it's not stated anywhere, that's kind of a moving target to me.
It is. Community standards are a moving target. It shouldn't ever be part of a court of law. Um, you know, the law and the standards should be the guiding light, but that's not always the case. Judges have a great flexibility in as they opine on cases, and what they're ever liable to say at any given point. Um, you know, I've read enough of their dissensions that some of this just, I'm not a lawyer, but some of it just doesn't make any sense. Um, I don't, I typically don't understand how they rule or why they rule the way they do. Um, you know, for the longest time um, in the state of Tennessee, several cases upheld a 1 year statute of limitations in contract. And then a case in West Tennessee threw that right out the window. So you never know what a judge is going to do or say. So as you look to incorporate or the way you expand your business, you know, maybe you want to do some handyman work and you advertise such. Um, you know, you can tell your clients that, oh, yeah, and I can fix that, you know, so after you get through the closing and you want me to come back and fix this railing for you, you know, where does that fit? Or you're a licensed electrician and you go back after the fact and fix things. These two comments in standards and law, you should use as your guiding light and either make a determination on your own or bring these forward to your attorney and get their professional opinion, which they're going to charge you money for a professional opinion. Um, but it also doesn't hurt to bring that up with your insurance agent. Where does your insurance company stand if you do these things? If you decide you're going to paint a house or you're going to do radon testing, you know, make sure your agent is apprised of your business practice and how that might affect your insurance policy.
My policy covers me for EFAS inspections, for radon, uh, for mold.
Hmm.
My insurance is higher, but it's covered under my policy.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the way a lot of them are written. Mhm.
Yeah, same here.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
So now the very first thing in you shall, the part seven, the heating systems, items A through D. The home inspector shall inspect permanently installed heating systems, including the heating equipment, normal operating controls. Okay. Which typically that's a thermostat. Um,
Mhm.
you shall inspect automatic safety controls. Okay. Do you need to write in your report that you found a moisture shutoff in the safety pan underneath of the compressor unit, or a carbon monoxide detector close to a gas furnace? How do you document in your report that you inspected that? How did you document chimneys, flues, vents were readily visible in your report? So when you look at all these things, solid fuel heating devices, heat distribution systems, including, the fans, pumps, ducts, piping, insulation, which a lot of reports cover part six. Most of the reports that I look at cover the part six of it, but many fail in the automatic safety controls. And then the presence of an installed heat source in each room. This is another thing that wipes out a lot of people. Um, did you check for a register in each room? Because when you go and look at, say, it's a two-story house with a half bathroom that kind of gets wedged in underneath of the stairwell, there's typically no register in that room. There's no heat source, there's no cooling source in there. Do you say so?
Yes.
Tim, can you
Yes.
hear me, Tim?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. I got into this. I use my IR camera and go around when I to the heat pump or gas, and I'll turn it on, and then I physically take a picture of every register and what the temperature is, just to confirm. But I can walk around and do it. When I was looking, I started doing this a long time ago, and when I got into it, I found a house that didn't have heat in the laundry room or the bathrooms or in attic insulation, and I got online. And it's my understanding that you're not required to have a heat source in a bathroom or a laundry room or closets, only in habitable spaces. So
Yeah.
if there's none in and I find several bathrooms that do not have a heat source. They may have a ceiling light heat, but frequently no heat source in the bathroom. And I don't report it. Well, I
Depends on
might.
the size of the room. Depends on the size
Standard
of the room.
bathroom, 5 by 8.
And so is that room an interior room where
Yeah,
every wall
interior
in that
bathroom.
room
Yeah.
is an interior wall?
Yeah, if you look online, the code, there's no requirement for a heat source in a bathroom or attic insulation even, which I thought that
But
was strange, but that's the same with the
Yeah.
laundry room or the garage.
I mean, I've run into that a lot with older homes where in the bathrooms where they've removed the old wall mount electric unit, right? And they never bothered installing a vent. But yeah, that's interesting.
mhm. Yeah, because the standards of practice doesn't say anything about the size of the room, whether it's an interior room. It just says in each room.
Now, the reason one of the reasons I brought this up, I started checking. I don't care if it's a new house, old house, or especially if it's a remodel, something from the 70s. This year alone, I found 2 homes where a corner bedroom has no heat. It has a register in the floor, but they've remodeled the lower level and somebody forgot to hook it up. I found 2 so far this year. And
Oopsie.
I ran into one pure by accident several years ago. I just, one of those odd things. I look downstairs and that doesn't seem right. I go upstairs and I put my hand on the register and there's nothing. Well, from that point on, I use my AR camera and I check every register. It just takes a few minutes to walk around when it's in heat. And is there actually heat coming out of every register? Because there
Mhm.
are, as I said, two so far this year, where one room, the register in one case had fallen off. It was in the crawl space, and
Mhm.
another one was a remodel, and they just forgot to hook it up. It was up
Yeah.
in the ceiling.
Yeah, that's
It
that's not
happens.
uncommon, Don.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being here today, Don. Uh,
Yeah. Hey, Tim, quick
Points.
question on number three there on the automatic safety controls.
Mhm.
So, this is maybe, another gotcha on my report. I've got a standard, automatic safety controls are not tested on an HVAC system. So, on the heat, the automatic heat shutoff, how in the world do you even test that? I mean, of course, I'm not an HVAC guy. There might be some easy way, but I mean, you're actually, if you're allowing the system to overheat and you're testing that automatic safety control, you're actually creating an unsafe condition that you could cause a fire by testing that. So, I mean, that one doesn't make sense to me at all.
That's
I agree.
correct.
That automatic safety control always confused me. And I
Yeah.
mean, on a gas furnace, you can see sometimes when the upper limit, it'll short cycle on you. If there's something wrong, and then I'll report it. But for the most part, I check it. I'll just run it through a normal heating cycle, and if everything goes on, comes off, turns on, to me it's been checked. But that one's always concerned me. How do I? I don't think I've really ever really checked the automatic
Well,
safety controls.
well, no, because the only way, because those overheat, that's what a safety control is on the
I
heat
agree.
cycle, is if it overheats. And for a safety reason, I
Yeah,
would never do that.
I
Yeah. I mean,
agree. Yeah.
let somebody sue me.
Yeah. So keep in mind, this is a visual inspection. So basically, you can say, I looked at, document that you looked at this. And then, Jim, just like you said earlier, the reason why you didn't test it, because it's an unsafe test. It truly is an unsafe test to start checking automatic safety controls. Are you going to fill a safety pan full of water to see if the automatic shutoff works from the air conditioning system?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So all you need to do, just like you did, Jim, like you described in your report, you didn't do this and why?
No,
And then you're covered.
in the overflow pan, I do reach down and pull up and see if it shuts it off. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
pretty easy check.
If it's a
Um,
float, what if
yeah,
it has one
if
of the
the float's
electronic
there,
sensors where it short circuits?
frequently they're broken or they're set off on the side, and I mean that I can report. Yeah, it's the internal safety stuff that it always
Yeah.
made me nervous because I don't really know what I'm doing in there. Yeah,
Yeah. Because you're not an HVAC expert. So
correct. Yeah, but the
the
safety, yeah, I always
next
look for
part of
that
this,
float.
part B, here's you're describing your energy sources for the system and the heating equipment type and distribution type. So is it got ductwork? Is it standalone? Um, is it like a PTAC unit or a mini split with a head? Um, in older homes, you're going to find that all they did was basically cut a hole in the floor and let the heat rise naturally. So all you have to do is describe that because it says you shall describe that. So, and then the home inspector shall operate the systems using normal operating controls.
That-
We don't need to jump through hoops to try to make somebody's system work. And then the home inspector shall open readily openable access panels provided by the manufacturer or the installer for routine homeowner maintenance. So if you take the screws out in order to look inside of a unit, well, that's not generally considered normal homeowner maintenance items because there's nothing in there. If they're holding it on with screws, there's typically nothing in there. Now, you go to a company like Ream, where they use little hand latches, little quarter turn hand latches to remove that cover. Do you take that one off, but not, say, a Goodman that's got screws?
I do both. I got to see what size it is. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Personally, I recommend you remove every cover. Um, but there again is your business decision. You're not obligated to. That's a business decision that you need to make in serving your clients because a screw is not readily openable by a homeowner. Okay. Now we get to the cooling systems, and we see a lot of similarity between the heating and the cooling. So central air conditioning, through the wall installed cooling systems, including um, cooling and air handling equipment, normal operating controls, distribution systems, including your fans, pumps, just like you did with the um, heating systems, and then the presence of an installed cooling source in each room. There again, if it's a register, if it's a standalone unit, you know, document the presence or the absence of a cooling source in each room because that's what the standards say that you do. Okay. In part 8, um, the home inspector shall describe the energy source for the system and the cooling equipment type, which virtually everything in Tennessee is electric as far as the energy source. And then describing the cooling equipment type. Gosh, I can't tell you how often this bites people. A lot of home inspectors don't know the difference between a mini split and a PTAC unit. I see that all the time. Many home inspectors are calling PTAC units mini splits, and they are not. Learn the difference. Study homes, pay attention to what you're writing in your reports, and get things listed accurately. One of the courses that I'm putting together is a course that's called What is it called? And we're going to talk about, a rafter, a hip rafter, a jack rafter, and a PTAC unit, a mini split. We're going to start talking about uh, how to describe things accurately in your reports. It's going to be a boring as ever course, but you're going to get a couple hours CE for it. So, in the cooling systems, the home inspector shall operate the systems using the normal controls, and the home inspector shall open readily openable access panels provided by the manufacturer or installer for routine maintenance. Again, the same thing. One of the questions I wanted to bring up today was, how many of you remove a floor register cover to look down into the ductwork? So you'll probably find that if you're not doing it, I highly recommend it because especially where that's especially important is in crawl space homes because you'll find a lot of those register boots aren't sealed properly to the floor. So every time that furnace or the cooling system kicks on, it sucks crawl space air up into the house, lowering your indoor air quality. And if you've got a moldy crawl space, guess what's getting blown into your house? The mold spores that are propagating in the crawl space. So take a look. It's kind of a client convenience thing. It gives your clients some negotiating power to get things fixed that have the potential to impact their health. I think health is a safety thing.
So, Tim, when it comes to the panels, so I had a situation happen to me about 4 years ago to where I took the panel off of a unit and the safety switch just fell apart. But it was running when I got there, but it was not going to run after I took that off. Um, the lady homeowner was extremely upset because it was about 100 degrees outside. And the husband finally come home and he was much more understanding. He was actually a maintenance guy. But that was a situation there that I was like, do I pull these panels anymore or not? What do you guys think in that situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a risk that you take. in service to your client.
You found a problem.
You sure did.
Yeah.
Just
Now
short
you got to
circuit the
pay
one.
for
Yeah,
it.
short circuit it and put it back in.
Mm-hmm.
How many times do you pull the cover off and the safety switch is taped closed so it won't shut down when you
Frequently.
remove the cover?
Yeah, frequently.
Often, yeah.
Yep. Boys, that happen all that. I've had air conditioning systems fail while I was there, where the compressor just flat locked up right in the middle of the inspection. Um, and the homeowners argued it was my fault and I needed to buy them a new one. Well, that didn't happen. So that's just like testing a garage door. It could fail just by pushing the button. So what you're going to be faced with in that condition when it escalates is, if it fails during testing, are you responsible for the repair? There's going
Yeah.
to be a
So
business decision that you're going to work with. How important was that real estate agent to you? So there you've got a business decision. Will that agent never recommend you again if you don't fix it? Or do you take a stand to say, failed in testing, I'm not responsible? Business decisions. They're not always fun,
Depends on the agent.
but sometimes you just got, part of being a business owner is sometimes you just got to pay out.
Anytime you test a GFCI and it won't reset, it's failed.
Oh, Larry, I had that happen to me. I put my little tester in there and tripped it. The little button comes shooting out and went down in the drain trap of the bathroom sink.
yeah, I've had that happen a
Yeah.
lot. Well, then water shut off valves too. Those are always risky as well, operating.
Yeah, yeah. We're not operating in a risk-free environment, but when things happen as a result of testing, how do you respond? And there's your business decision, is how you respond to those types of failures.
I was
I didn't do it.
I was gonna fix the switch, but like I said, the husband came home and was extremely understandable, but I was gonna repair it. But it did make me wonder, the right person could really cause you a lot of grief.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Terry, did you go up to Jeff and Tina's grand opening?
I did. I had to go later that night. I was pretty busy. I got there about 6.
Oh, okay. I didn't see you. I went for the ribbon cutting at noon.
Yeah, they told me you were there. They said, "Hey, we seen Tim today."
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on. Electrical systems, part 9. The home inspector shall, okay, here we're getting to a point that buries some home inspectors. The home inspector shall inspect the service entrance conductors. I pretty much see everybody doing that. The service equipment, the grounding equipment, the main overcurrent device, and main and distribution panels. I pretty much see everybody doing that. Amperage and voltage ratings of the service. Well, the only way to know is to stick a meter in there, and you're not required to do that. So that's kind of where that bit. One guy here in Nashville is a new apartment complex got put in on a 208 system. And so that greatly affects your heat and air systems and your water heater. If you got an electric water heater operating 208 instead of 240, yeah, it takes longer to heat the water up. So he reported it as 240. It turned out to be a 208. He had to refund the cost of the inspection. That was a business decision that he made for that error. And then you look at your branch circuit conductors, their overcurrent devices, and the compatibility of their ampacities and voltages. Okay. So look at the wires and what size circuit breaker it's attached to, or fuse. What size fuse is it attached to? Are the two compatible? Um, the operation of a representative number of installed ceiling fans, light fixtures, switches, receptacles located in the house, the garage, or on the dwelling's exterior walls. The polarity and grounding of all receptacles within 6 feet of interior plumbing fixtures, all receptacles in the garage or carport, and on the exterior. So you got to test all your GFCIs. And in some places, you can't find the reset. It's covered up in the garage or somewhere. What a nightmare that is every time you got to
I
do
try to
that.
locate
I
those to
hate
begin
that.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to find those to begin with because a lot of times your bathrooms are tied to that same circuit.
Yeah.
Hey, what about breakers that are not listed for the panel? We know that there's manufacturers you can swap. I actually write it up as breaker not listed for panel. Do you all do that?
Yes. Or multiple.
Absolutely. Mismatched panels. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I
I've
I
talked
have
to
a rule
some
of
that I've talked to some
I
that do not, but I always have. I've always thought even though they work, it's still important.
yeah, I have
Yeah.
a rule of thumb on that. If it's maybe one or something, obviously you can probably write that up on most panels in older homes. But if it's just like a mess and there's, three or four or five, 10, I write that up. I mean, technically you guys are right. I mean, right. If it's a mismatch even with one, but
Yeah, you frequently see some of the breakers don't fit too.
Yeah.
I've had two mismatched breakers go in. One would sit and the other one wouldn't. And I assume that has to do with their tolerances. You literally couldn't slip it in. It would stick out and would keep you from putting the dead front on.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
excuse my cuckoo clock.
Yep. Write those up.
Yeah,
That's a
absolutely.
good thing to write up just for your own personal protection.
I love it when I do fuses and everything's got a 30 amp fuse in it, instead of
Mm-hmm.
a 20.
Yep.
I think I've only found one fuse panel in the last 5 years that was wired properly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so continuing on, the home inspector shall describe the service amperage and voltage, the service entry conductor materials. This is something that's frequently omitted. If it's aluminum wire, say so. If it's copper wire feeding the service entry, say it's copper. That's something that gets overlooked in a whole bunch of reports. They don't describe the conductor materials. And then here's the easy one: is the service overhead or underground, and the location. And this is what gets people too, is they're not telling their clients where these panels are located. That's another failure that gets a lot of home inspection reports, is they're not describing the location. And it says you shall. And then the home inspector shall report the presence of any readily accessible single strand aluminum branch circuit wiring. Okay, here's where I sought judgment from the state when I started seeing copper clad aluminum in track homes. So it's easy to spot because on a 20 amp copper clad aluminum wire is the size of a 10 gauge wire instead of 12 gauge. In a 15 amp circuit, it's the size of a 12 gauge wire versus a 14 gauge wire. So it's relatively easy to spot. And also, when you look at the cut ends on the neutral bar, you'll see the aluminum inside of the copper. So
It's
I
kind of like the old
asked,
nickel plated copper. Same way. They used to have the nickel plated copper.
yeah, the tinned
Right.
copper.
Yes.
Yeah. And that one's easy because a lot of times that coating gets peeled right off as soon as they clamp down on it. This copper clad aluminum, the copper doesn't always get taken off because it's so molecularly bonded to the aluminum. So I asked the state, do we need to report copper clad aluminum as single strand aluminum? And I love their reply. We recommend that you
Depends.
follow the standards of practice. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Elma. Okay. So, um, personally, if I see copper clad aluminum, I report it as such, and there's no clarification if it needs to be listed as single strand aluminum.
When you said a track builder, was it DR Horton?
No, this was actually in Ryan, but
Okay.
yes, DR Horton's doing it too.
Okay. I've done several. I haven't run across it yet. Um, but I'll look for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fairly easy to spot, Don, just because you're going to see a great big giant wire going into a 20 amp circuit breaker and you wonder why. Okay. Continuing goals, the home inspector shall report presence or absence of smoke detectors. This is part of the 2004 thing. You got to document every smoke detector and where it's located. The presence or absence of smoke alarms by location of the area or room. If any area or room containing smoke alarms that appear to have been painted, obstructed, or otherwise altered, write it up. If the smoke alarms appear more than 10 years from the date of manufacture, and recommend that any such smoke alarm be replaced with a device of the same type. Okay, so I asked the question of the state fire marshal when he was at the expo. Hey, Mr. Fire Marshal, I ran into a house and it had smoke alarms in every room in the hallway, but they were the spring wound ones. Should I recommend those be replaced with the same type? And he goes, well, I don't think anybody thought about that. Another, thank you very much, Elma. So take a look at your smoke alarms. If they look to be old, explain to them how to take them off the wall and check the manufacturer's date code behind them and replace them if they're 10 years old or more. More electrical. You shall report if a battery powered smoke alarm appears more than 10 years old, call the state fire marshal and get some new ones. And then all requirements set forth in paragraph 9D, except when access is obstructed, could damage the property, or when dangerous or adverse situations are suspected. And this is something that we got added over what the state originally listed because we don't want to be dragging ladders in and cracking tile floors or scratching wooden floors. We we it wasn't popular, but we got that written in. That turned out to be a blessing for everybody. Now let's move on to plumbing. Hey, any more questions on the electrical? Okay.
We've done 2 hours. You want to take a break?
Yeah, you guys want to take 10 real quick? Good
Okay.
deal. Take 10. Let's come
Yeah, let's
back
do
at
it.
11:16 and we'll wrap it up.
All righty. I was going to tell you, what my opinion was, we can operate from, since somebody's been there all the time, you won't know. You want to eat, Bella? You want to eat lunch? She's standing in there. Go to your mama. Mama's got it. Mama's got it.
All right. Got everybody back, ready to go? Okay, so we'll look at the home inspector shall inspect interior water supplies and distribution systems, including the piping materials, the supports. The supports is a big one. Make sure that they, about every 4 feet or so, that like in a crawl space home, everything's nicely held up in place. Insulation, fixtures and faucets, functional flow, leaks and cross connections. So those are all, you shall inspect these particular things. How to document that you inspected them? Good question. Photographs always help. Check boxes on a report or a statement in a report always goes a long way. Check your interior drain, waste, and vent systems, including the traps, the drain, the waste, the vent piping, piping supports and pipe insulation where appropriate, leaks and functional drainage. Also, your hot water systems, including the water heating equipment, normal operating controls, automatic safety controls, um, like a TPRV, you can inspect it, take a photograph of it. Other than that, you can't really document real well that you certainly don't want to open it. So things like that are always kind of the bane, the way the standards are written, is how do you document things like a TPRV other than
Tim,
visual inspection?
are you all running into a lot of these gray flexible drain lines or under the sinks? How do you write those up?
Um, I just say it's a non-standard product.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
or
flex line.
clogs.
A lot of them are flex lines. I write it
Unconventional,
if it's
yeah.
flex line.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's about all you can really do on those. Their homeowners love them because they're so easy and flexible.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have to worry about perfect alignment.
So do flippers.
I guess if
Flippers
it gets
love them
clogged,
too.
it's nice and easy. You just squeeze it and you can knock the clog out.
I put something about how the the folds in the plastic flex is collects debris, clogs up easier. It's
Mhm.
more fragile. It'll fail quicker, leak quicker, things like
Yeah.
that.
That's kind of what
Yeah.
I do, conducive to clogs. Yep.
Yep. Corrugated drain lines, I always write up. So, okay. The home inspector.
Had one
Yeah.
use a radiator hose. I had one use a radiator hose for a drain house.
Well, I guess that would probably last longer than most.
That is awesome redneck ingenuity.
It just didn't have a trap.
It would definitely not fail the pressure test, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the home inspector shall describe the water supply and distribution piping materials, drain waste and vent piping materials, water heating equipment, and the location of any main water supply shutoff device. This is the main water shutoff valve gets a few home inspectors because that's not listed as part of their report. It's the location of it.
Yeah.
So
Mine does.
the home inspector shall operate all plumbing fixtures, including their faucets and all exterior faucets attached to the house, except where the flow end is connected to an appliance. So if they've got a garden hose attached to it, do you remove it to test it?
If it's easy.
Yeah.
I at least try. Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
easy, yes.
How many of you actually put a pressure gauge on the water line?
I do.
I do if there's flow problems. Yeah, but primarily just for informational purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. I test every one that I can because some of these homes, they're going directly to the main water supply and bypassing a pressure regulator. Um, we had a big problem in my son's house where he lives. We ended up having to put 3 pressure regulators in his water line because if it ran straight through, it's 300 psi.
Holy Jesus.
I
Yeah.
had the same problem at my last house, Tim. They built a big subdivision up on top of the hill called Bridgemore, and they're multi-million-dollar homes, and they were way up on a hill. Well, they installed a new pump at where you came into my street,
I don't
and
think so. I don't know.
and and they put it on
Actually, yes,
there.
she did.
It
She
blew
came
the
in the
lines
bedroom at
off.
like 7:30. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was awake during that part.
Mute yourself, Mark.
All right, sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I always put a pressure gauge on so that if I see that the water pressure is 80 psi or above, then I can recommend a pressure regulator be
Yeah.
installed.
I do too.
Go through a few of them every year, especially in the winter when they freeze up in the back of my truck.
Yeah.
Um,
I eliminated that. I started putting them in a plastic bag and putting them in my computer bag and bringing them in with me. So
oh,
I did. Truck.
I'm not that bright, Larry. Okay. Part 11, structural components and foundations. The home inspector shall inspect structural components, including the foundation, the floors, the walls. You got to look at all these things that constitute the structural integrity of a home. Okay. Now, you shall describe all of these things. What type of foundation? Is it stone? Is it straw bale? Is it post and beam? You know, is it standard block stem walls? Is it a slab? You know, describe all of these different things, especially when it comes to columns and piers. You get into older homes, they frequently use rocks and metal poles and cedar stumps and all kinds of different things. Whatever variety they've used, list that in your report, what they've done. Your ceiling structure, you know, trusses, rafters, you know, what have they done? Especially if they use rafters and then they've got struts and purlins put in, you know, list all those kinds of things. And then you know, basically your whole roof structure. Just make sure all that's described appropriately in your reports. And then probe structural components where deterioration is suspected. Um, I see guys that use an awl or something like an ice pick. Some guys use a knife. Uh, you know, whatever you can to probe for deterioration of structural components. Um, Especially like in one case, I had the chimney creosote had leaked down through the stem wall so much that you could take your finger and poke a hole in the concrete stem wall. So I ended up having to write that up that they need to get that fixed. You shall enter underfloor crawl spaces, basements, and attic spaces except when access is obstructed, when entry could damage the property, or when dangerous or adverse situations are suspected. We all know what that means. Don't crawl through a water puddle to inspect a crawl space.
Exactly.
That will never end well. Report the method used to inspect the underfloor crawl space. Did you crawl in? Did you inspect it from the hatch? How did you do these things in the attic, in the crawl space? And here's one that's getting folks too, is report signs of water penetration into the building or signs of condensation on building components. In attics, that's pretty frequent. When you see roofing nails coming through, you're going to probably see condensation on the end of that nail that left a stain on the roof decking. And believe it or not, that's condensation on a building component, and you should list that in your report. Likewise, if you see water staining on woods, report the stain. And then you might want to say, I probed it for deterioration. This is still good solid wood. It does not need replaced or repaired or anything else. Those kinds of little comments go a long ways when the client comes back later on. If there was a fire and the fire department left water stains from their hoses on things, just report anything that you see that looks like condensation or a potential water leak, whether it be the roof or the plumbing.
Kim, quick
Yes.
question for you. Because probe structural components,
Mhm.
a home inspection is a non-invasive visual inspection of the property. So by probing it, now we're becoming invasive. So isn't that a conflict?
Yes, it is a conflict, and that was brought to the attention of the executive director of commerce and insurance for the state of Tennessee. And he kind of pretty much said, well, it says you gotta probe them. And all other duties as assigned, as you see in some of these job descriptions. And this is another duty as assigned is determining if a structural component is deteriorated to the point that it needs repair replacement, subsequent observation, or further evaluation by a specialist. And that probing that component helps you determine which of those three to choose if it's necessary. In one of the crawl space homes that I did, this was real early on in the encapsulation series. And they encapsulated this crawl space, but they did nothing about the humidity. And so the whole center of the house was like this. I went through there, I was able to stick my knife all the way through the 2x10 floor joist. And so the pictures I took where you could see the tip of the knife and the handle of the knife, 30 floor joists where that rotted. And so I didn't need to probe it, but the picture said 1,000 words. And so the sellers ended up replacing virtually every floor joist in the crawl space.
Well, the reason why I ask is because it being a contradictory, it could become a legal issue. Has this ever become a legal issue before?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just like with electrical panels. I mean, we're required to open them up, and that's not a visual only inspection either.
Yeah, that's beyond visual. Yep. But that's the way they wrote the standards. Our job is simply to comply.
That's ashy for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashy. But then InterNACHI adopted it too.
Yeah.
So when we get to part 12, the roof coverings, you shall inspect the roof coverings, the roof drainage systems, flashings, skylights, chimneys, roof penetrations, signs of leaks or abnormal condensation on building components. Um, how many of you report multiple layers of shingles on a roof? Yeah, it's a great idea. One of the lawsuits I'm working on now, the home inspector did not report it, and this roof had 5 layers of shingles on it.
How's the
Wow.
system held up?
Wow. That's
Thank
hard to
goodness it was a
miss.
really old house, so it didn't cause any sagging of the roof structure. But it was obvious. I mean, it was this thick. It was an inch thick number of shingles on that roof. Well, you got a whole lot of protection against a leak, I guess. Okay.
On the way.
And the home inspector shall describe the type of roof covering materials and report the methods used to inspect the roofing. You know, are they 3-tab? Are they the compositional shingles? Is it metal roof? Is it copper? Uh, you know, what type of roll roofing? You know, describe what you got. You know, TPM, whatever's there. And then, how did you inspect it? From the roof edge, binoculars? Did you use a drone? Uh, how did you inspect that roof? Just document that in your report.
I have a roofer do my inspections on my roof, and he sends me pictures, and he does a little more in detail than I would, because he pulls up the tabs, just make sure that they're properly nailed, which we don't do. But
Yes.
but
And
he's
Larry, I'm seeing more inspectors do that is they have a roofer come out and do the roof inspection for them, and get a full report.
yeah, that's what I do.
I don't know of any litigation that would challenge that. Um, but as long as you got it documented appropriately in your report, you,
Mhm.
then you're up to a couple of litigators to figure out, are you compliant?
Right. Well, I've also, he does a ton of pictures too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Pictures, pictures, pictures.
Mhm.
More pictures, more better. Okay. The home inspector shall inspect the wall cladding, flashings, and trim, entry doors, and a representative number of windows.
What's representative?
Well, if there's one window in a room and you can't get to it, you should say you could not test this window
Right. And take a picture,
and take a picture. Yep.
because that bed may be moved when they move in.
Yeah. In one of the cases that I'm currently working, there was 8 windows in this room. The home inspector tested 3 of them. 2 of them didn't work, but those weren't the ones he tested. So
I test every one I can get to.
so we'll figure out shortly what happens in that case. Test your garage door operators. You got the little lights kind of as the door's closing, stick your foot, make sure it opens up back up. The the garage door manufacturers and the automatic opener installers, they say to test the doors using a flat 2x4 in the center of the door. That's what they list in their manufacturer's installation instructions, how to do it. Um, I see a lot of people stick their hand up there and stop at mid-track. I wonder how many doors they had to replace doing that. Because that puts a real tremendous load at the connection on the top panel. I carry a 9-inch level with me, and that's what I use to test a garage door. Haven't broke one yet. Um, Test your decks, your balconies, stoops, steps, airways, porches, and applicable railings. And that always kind of gets some people is, how high up off the ground before a railing is required. Um, if it's up knee high, I always make the recommendation in the report they should have a safety rail. And then I let them argue it out with the sellers, whether there's going to be one or not. Because I'm not a codes inspector.
Thing too that I'm not going to test is you should be able to put 200 pounds of pressure against that handrail without it coming off. Well, I'm not going to put my 200 pounds against it and see if I fall in the yard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I may grab it and wiggle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it wiggles, I pointed out that it may need some attention, or
Yeah,
if I can move it that easily, I point,
exactly.
especially if it's a middle one, if it's between, right in the center, at the weakest point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But other than that, yeah, I'm not leaning on it.
Yeah. Check your eaves, your soffits and fascias, your vegetation, grading, drainage, driveways, patios, walkways, retaining walls with retaining walls with respect to their effect on the condition of the building. Okay. So if there's a retaining wall at 90 yards in the backyard, I'm not sure how that would relate, but I would still recommend you make a comment in the report because retaining walls are mentioned in the standards. Yeah, Larry?
When on your decks, when they do cantilevers on the deck, you're supposed to go back twice the length of what it's cantilevering out. How can you do that when it's finished? How do you write that up?
Personally, I say I can't prove that this meets the standards to installation. Anytime they have a cantilevered deck. Typically, the guidelines I tend to follow is the American Deck Builders Association. I tend to follow their guidelines for deck construction and attachment to the house. And in our area of Tennessee now, all decks have to be built freestanding and then secured to the home. Okay. And so that's the way I tend to write most deck installations is if it's not built freestanding, I say so. And then I start looking at how it's secured to the home, looking for flashing, over flashing, bolts versus nails, lag screws versus bolts. Um, and then start looking for leakage when you do a crawl space if there's one present.
How many of you guys ride up on the decks or run across a lack of lateral bracing or anchors on a deck?
Yeah.
I do.
Yep. Yeah. If you
And
follow
no
the
flashing.
American Deck Builder standards, that's part of it.
Well, and that's like 98% of the decks here in Middle Tennessee. I rarely run into a deck that has lateral bracing. Yeah.
Well, Jim, you know what the home inspector joke is, don't you? The buyers
Yeah, I'm
all go,
open for new
"Oh,
ones.
it has a deck." And the home inspectors go, "Oh, you have a deck."
Exactly.
Same words,
With no
different
flashing.
context. Yeah. Yeah. The other home inspector joke I tell people is you've all heard that phrase, what were they thinking? Well, that's two questions. When you see something, you go, what were they thinking? So moving on, part 13, exterior components. The home inspector shall describe your wall claddings, operate all entryway doors and a represented number of windows, permanently or operate garage doors manually or by using permanently installed controls for a garage door operator. Do we all know how to test those? Is there any questions about how to test a garage door? And then report whether or not any garage door operator will automatically reverse or stop when meeting reasonable resistance during closing. Okay. Look up the manufacturer's installation instructions and test accordingly. That's the best option you got going. Especially when it comes to like using extension cords on those operators. Like so many of these newer garages, they have 10 and 12 foot ceilings, but the operators hanging down, 8 feet off the ground. So they had to run an extension cord in order to plug it in. Well, that violates the manufacturer's installation instructions. And I write up an extension cord should not be used. Call an electrician. And then probe exterior wood components where deterioration is suspected. Door frames, decks, window frames when they're wood. Again, that's invasive, but the government says you got to do it. In part 14, interior components. And here's another one that tends to kind of catch a few home inspectors. You shall inspect the walls, ceiling, and floors, steps, stairways, balconies, and railings, counters, and a representative number of built-in cabinets, and then a representative number of doors and windows. My personal philosophy is I test everyone I can get to.
Exactly.
And then in part B, operate a representative number of windows and interior doors. So, and then report signs of water penetration into the building or signs of condensation on building components. Look for water stains. I'm sure most everybody kind of catches on to this one. It's the reporting of water stains that generally tend to be omitted from reports when they're present but not reported. And then the home inspector shall inspect insulation, vapor retarders in unfinished spaces, ventilation of attics and foundation areas. So describe your ventilation systems in attics, and then your kitchen, bathroom, and laundry venting systems. Because everybody knows bath vents don't need to go outside, right? Yes, they do. So write those up when you see them. The operation of any readily accessible attic ventilation fan. If you can get to the test system, it's a good idea to test it. Most of them are up so high you can't even possibly get there. And when temperature permits, the operation of any readily accessible thermostatic control. If you can get there. And then another part in part 15, describe the insulation. So is it cellulose? Is it fiberglass? What did they use? Is it blue jean, that blue jean material? Is it spray foam? The absence of insulation in unfinished spaces at conditioned surfaces. In Tennessee, in this area, you're not required to insulate crawl spaces between the floor joists. So if there is insulation there, I describe it. If there is not insulation there, I say there isn't any present. This may not be a requirement of this building jurisdiction. Because just in Sumner County where I live, we have 8 separate jurisdictions. It is absolutely impossible to keep up with the exceptions of each jurisdiction as they go through the code cycles, because they're all on different code cycles and they all have different things that they decide to enforce or not enforce. So since we're not codes inspectors, this is a CYA thing. And then part 16, the home inspector shall inspect and operate the basic functions of the following kitchen appliances. Okay. Here's where photographs really help. Permanently installed dishwashers through a normal cycle. If you're doing a 2-bedroom condo and you got to wait 3 hours for a dishwasher to get done,
Yeah.
that kind of sucks. But that's what it says you got to do. Test out your ranges, your cooktops, permanently installed ovens. I do those with photographs. Take a picture of a fire or a glowing element just to cover your base. Trash compactors, I've never thrown something in there to see if it works. I'll push the button, and if it makes noise, I say it works. your garbage disposals, your ventilation equipment or range hoods, and permanently installed microwave ovens. Take a close look at your range hoods. Um, One of the cases I've got right now, they put in a really nice range hood and it doesn't vent outside, it vents in underneath of the cabinets into a nice wooded area. So that's going to get that guy in trouble, I do believe. Permanently installed microwaves. Uh, there's different ways to test those. Um, you can take a paper towel and get it wet, run it for 5 seconds and see if it gets hot. You got to make sure people can get their microwave popcorn every evening. And then now we're down to the end. And here we're looking at the word shall in the code of ethics. In number one, the licensee shall discharge their duties with fidelity to the public, their clients, and with fairness and impartiality to all. The opinions expressed by licensees shall only be based on their education, experience, and honest convictions. And this is a defense thing right here for you is does your education allow you to make these statements? Does your experience allow you to make these statements? And do you honestly believe what you're saying is true? A licensee shall not disclose any information about the results of an inspection without the approval of the client for whom the inspection was performed or the client's designated representative. This right here says you can't just automatically send it to their agent without their prior approval. I have a little statement. I say, I got to ask you two questions. Would you like me to send a copy of your home inspection report to your real estate agent? And most people think about it for a minute and they go, well, yeah. And then the other one is, how do you want to pay for today?
Exactly.
So it's all confidential stuff. In item 4, no licensee shall accept compensation or any other consideration from more than one party without consent of all parties. No licensee shall accept or offer commissions or allowances directly or indirectly from other parties dealing with the client in connection with work for which the licensee is responsible. This has come up in a case that I'm working on where the home inspector was paying two real estate firms for preferred vendor status. And then he joined one of these exclusive organizations. This one happened to be called BNI. And so he was paying membership into BNI to be the exclusive home inspector for that whole organization.
You know,
Go ahead, Mark.
Tim, Keller Williams has a pay to play program too. Where if you want to be on their preferred vendor list, you have to pay them $500 or $1,000. And I noticed a lot of realtors over here in East Tennessee have been doing that.
Yeah. Yep. In my area, Cry Like charges $1,200 for that preferred vendor status.
Well, then I only complain about $500.
Yeah, so my question, because it obviously does not allow for level playing field of just professional standards and performance, it's pay to play. I actually inquired quite a few years ago about so there's no policing of this, obviously. The answer I got was only if there was a complaint registered against a particular home inspection company would they investigate that. But it's obviously it's the dirty little secret that's out there um, as far as being preferred vendors and paying their fees and all that. I've been, I was aware of Keller Williams a long time ago because I did a lot of when I first started. I used a lot of KW people from like 3 or 4 offices. Um, so yeah, I mean, what is the consensus on that, guys? I mean, is that just, well, that's part of the business, or Because again, there's no policing of that particular item, and it seems to be something that's abused quite a bit.
Jim, you're absolutely correct. Personally, I never have paid this because as I read number 5, I offer a payment or an allowance to another party that's dealing with my client, which happens to be their client. Um, I made a business decision after reading that. I don't work for any Keller Williams or Cry-like agents. Um, all the agents that tended to use me worked for other firms, and they didn't require preferred vendor status.
I met with the principal broker at Keller Williams and explained to him the ethics rules for home inspectors and said how they're requiring me to pay them a uh, preferred vendor fee was contrary to the ethics that we are bound by. He says, well, you're the kind of inspector we want then. And then he wouldn't change his rules. So
Yes.
Well, Keller Williams is also the ones that don't want their agents, whether they're the buyer's representative or the sellers. Keller Williams don't want them to see the home inspection, period.
Yes. Yep. That was another reason I don't work for any Keller Williams agents.
Well, they were one of the parties of the big lawsuits there a few years back too. So
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. No licensee shall express within the context of an inspection an appraisal or opinion of the market value, which we definitely don't want to do that.
Mhm.
Before the execution of a contract to perform a home inspection, a licensee shall disclose to the client any interest in a business that may affect the client. No licensee shall allow his or her interest in any business to affect the quality or the results of your inspection work that the licensee may be called upon to perform. Um, that opens up some gray areas, in my opinion, but especially if you're using your home inspection to gain work in other areas. Number 8, licensees shall not engage in false or misleading advertising or otherwise misrepresent any matters to the public. This number 8. There's another case that I'm working on where the home inspector advertises that his entire team shows up to every home inspection. He's solo. He has no employees. So the people that are filed the lawsuit said, "Where's the team?" And he says, "Well, it's just me. I'm independent." No, you told me you were bringing your entire team. Hence the lawsuit.
I guess me, myself, and I doesn't apply then. Huh?
Yeah. Okay. So now we're off into, the things we all got to do, the part 1 and 2, having your insurance all set up and ready to go. Your records retention. Here's the one I talked about earlier. All home inspectors shall retain original and true copies or electronic copies of all written contracts and agreements for home inspector services and all home inspection reports for a period of at least 3 years commencing on the home inspection date. Now, the standards don't list photographs. It only lists written documentation. I highly recommend you keep your photographs as well. In the event of lawsuits, the photographs are going to potentially save you from a disaster. It will definitely help you if someone files a complaint with the state. If someone files a complaint with the state of Tennessee, another licensed home inspector will review that complaint and provide a judgment opinion to the Attorney General about proceeding with adjudication on that case. Okay. If you want to know who those home inspectors are doing that work, their names will appear in the Tennessee's open checkbook on the website. If you want to go look up those guys, you can do that. My name not on there no more. All home inspectors provide the commissioner with a change of address. Okay, that ends what I've got. Does anybody have any questions or something you'd like to discuss? And then that will conclude today.
Great session, Tim.
Okay.
Well, we'll hold off putting the certificates out until we get a course number, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay. So I recorded who all was here, and I can turn those on as soon as we get a course number. So
Quick
Okay.
question for the board members that are here. What's the deadline for securing for the next meeting there in August? Do we have a deadline or?
I gotta
It's
get
going to be the
classes
first
for it.
Saturday in August.
Yeah.
As far as
Yeah.
securing the location, that's what I'm asking.
Oh,
s-
location.
that's the better, the sooner the better. But it's, you can get it within a month
Okay.
prior
Yeah.
to.
Okay. Is there any leeway if they ask whatever fee if they don't do it for free and they want to pay? Is there any leeway for that or no? Because I know usually we get volunteers, they volunteer and let us do it for free. So I just want to ask because if I ask the Hard Rock Cafe, they may say there's a charge.
yes, bring it. The fees have to be approved by a board.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. So the next
Tim, good
meeting will
job.
be Saturday, August 1st. And we'll work on that. And usually if we have a facility secured 30 days in advance,
Yeah.
that gives us the opportunity to work through any issues that come up.
Okay.
And then if you guys know anybody that can teach classes, on that class, even though it's a meeting class, there may be the chance that we may have to use a Zoom an instructor. Because getting the classes, the way the state's got that you can't do anything for 3 years is really hard to get classes.
Yeah.
So I know that both insurance companies that a lot of us use have a 2-hour class that they will teach, but it's going to be Zoom because they're both out of state.
Okay. And if any of our members have a special expertise or want to create classes and you have questions about that, reach out to me and I'll help you
Yeah.
get your class created and I will help you get it approved also.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. Larry and I have been doing this for quite a long time. So we think we can give you a hand.
Longer than we want to admit,
All right.
or we should.
And then we'll get them certificates out to everybody just as quick as I can get a course number. Does
Thanks,
anybody
Tim.
need that certificate right away?
No, I don't.
Okay. As soon as we get a course number, we'll get them certificates out to everybody.
Hold on, one other thing. Are we going to be having, when's the next board meeting? Did we decide?
Typically, would be July 31st, which is the Friday before our meeting. But we'll probably
think
have
we need
one
to
or
meet
two
sooner.
ahead of that mark by Zoom. We've been doing it.
Okay. Well, because I
think
know
we need
not
to
the
meet
whole board is
before
here,
then.
so that's why I'm asking what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Personal
And
opinion, I think we need to meet before July.
yeah. Hey, and I got to tell everybody too, we've got a couple of changes coming to our constitution and bylaws. And so if you're interested in running for an office, jump in. And then in August, we're going to take a membership vote on the changes to the Constitution as proposed. And then majority president wins.
Tim, to give me back a host mode.
Oh, hey, how about that? Okay. I just click stop sharing, right?
Yeah. No, you have to, um, let's see if I can pull it back on myself. Okay, I can reclaim it. So I did.
Okay, great. Okay, I see there's 28 chat things. Oh, the section item number that require the mention of the free smoke detector program. That link isn't listed in the standards of practice. Um, Lee, I can send that to you by email. So text me your email address and I'll make sure you get that. Or we could have we can get that sent out, can't we? Are you able to create notes for your own use in an assessment? Yes, you can. Most of the report formats that I've seen allow you to create special notes. Um, and then Jim Fusion, to me, if you write in your agreement it is an assessment, you're covered. I won't argue that point one bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I also had a question on geothermal. If anybody has any links to CE or classes or anything like that. Um, I don't know if you saw that. So
yeah, I'm just now looking through them now. Okay.
Is infrared still doing classes, Tim?
Do what, Larry?
Is the